All right. In theory, I am live on the internet. In theory, my audio and video are working. And I believe that's true because I was talking to Dave backstage just for a moment. So hello there, sword friends. This is a Ramble stream. I'm going to be joined today by Dave with Dynamo Sword Channel, and I'll give him a chance to introduce himself in just a moment. We're going to talk about some fun sword-related things, and hopefully you can all keep chat lively and ask questions and all that kind of stuff. I will preface that Dave's got a sword channel. It's linked in the description down below. I'd encourage you to go and check it out. And I will endeavor not to be sucky at monitoring chat. I probably will be, but I'm gonna make my best effort not to. Anyway, with all of that said, I'm gonna bring in Dave and let him introduce himself. Hello there, sir.
Hi, everybody. As some of you might know from watching my channel, I'm David from Dynamo Sword Channel. I've been a sword enthusiast pretty much my whole life. Being an 80s kid, just kind of always liked swords. You know, He-Man, Willow, the 80s was full of swords and I loved them. If it had a sword, I wanted it. I wanted to play with it, whatever. And it just kind of evolved from that to, kind of focusing on martial arts, focusing on as I got into my 20s, more into like sword history and medieval history and things like that. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm started. That's why my channel focuses on medieval history, oakshot typology, things like that. So I'm kind of, I guess, more of the medieval guy, but I've been around the block to where, I know a lot of different, swords and stuff, Japanese mostly and European, but yeah.
Dave, I didn't get any of that. Can you repeat yourself completely? I'm fucking with you.
Oh.
Thank you for joining me on this Ramble stream. Initially, what kind of prompted and what I thought we could have some fun conversation about, amongst other sword-related things, because I know as soon as you get people into a room that like swords, it's pretty easy to go well off topic into something else that's more interesting at the time, which we may do. But you made some comments about free samples and how they, maybe I'm paraphrasing here, but kind of pollute the community a little bit, how they may influence people or the, maybe their ads, maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, but that's a subject that I'd like to talk about today because it's near and dear to my heart. And I'm curious about your thoughts on which companies are doing it, who you think is impacted, and what we can do as reviewers and people that I'm sure are trying to help the community, what we can do better. And I thought that was an interesting conversation. So if you're not opposed, I'd like to start with the hard hitting topics.
All right. Absolutely.
And I've got beer. Hopefully you do too.
Yeah. That's what's funny. I don't know if, just not to drag on, but a lot of my videos are done at a local bar that, I've worked at for a lot of years. And ironically, I'm that weird bartender that doesn't drink. I guess that's why I make a good bartender. But yeah, I've never been much of a drinker, but I have some Coke Zero here. So yeah,
It sounds incredibly
lame. Dark. It's Guinness. We'll just call it Guinness.
Yeah, it's Guinness. Okay.
All right. But anyway, no. So what I'm kind of getting at is what I've kind of noticed with a lot of just recently, a lot of us have gotten review samples. I've gotten review samples. Most of my a review sample is what got me started with Dynamo Sword Channel. My first video was the Honshu tactical broadsword. And that was introduced to me on Sword Buyer's Guide Forum, that we're both members of. And Paul, the administrator, he shot out an email and said, "Hey, who wants to do a review of this sword?" And you and me both, we've done a lot of written reviews on Sword Buyer's Guide, done them for years. I'd written on, written reviews for at least 10 years by then. And I was like, "Hey, I'll give it a shot." And then Paul's like, "Well, here's the catch. They want a video. United Cutlery want a video." And I was like, "Well, I've never really done video, but guess I could try." And that's kind of how it got started. So ironically, even though I kind of sound like a humbug, the channel kind of got started on a review sample. But that aside, what I kind of think is going on with a lot of like the Chinese market today is that, they're kind of saturating the market with review samples. And it just and of course it's just marketing 101. I can't blame them. The more their name gets out, the better. I just think it's really hard for maybe some people, and I might sound like a snob, but I'm not trying to, and don't take it as that, but some of the guys that have experience reviewing swords have been around swords for a while. It's easier for us to kind of, call a spade, because we see the sword, we see whatever. I think some people, they get excited. They're getting in, starting a YouTube channel, and here's, a certain vendor or something that, hey, I'll give you a sword, review it, give us a good word, give us a shout out. And then, oh yeah, hey, I got this sword and it's great. I love it. And, and it kind of goes from there. And then it just kind of accumulates to where next, a whole channel is just exclusively those swords. And then, and that's kind of what I was getting at, and this is something that I feel is easy sometimes for, some people to kind of look at them like, okay, well, they're just a fanboy now, or they're a rep. And I know one of the things I've always taken to heart that you kind of remember, and we don't do so much in the videos anymore, but I know it was kind of a disclaimer we always did on the written reviews is that, I bought this sword with my own money, or if I didn't buy the sword with my own money, this is why I got it. This is what it's for and all that. And, and you've always been very, descriptive and honest with that, especially with a lot of the review samples you've gotten. And, that's kind of just that difference that I noticed, that I think that, okay, well, there's so many review samples going out, and now there's so many of you sword tubers or whatever. It just kind of oversaturates, if that makes any sense. That's kind of what I was getting at. It's hard to, I think it's harder for the new guys to not like something that's given to them because it was given to them. That biasness can kind of, even though it might not be intentional, is still kind of there because, hey, this vendor's great. They gave me something and I want to, promote the vendor and be their friend, more than be critical of a review, I guess.
Sure. How much, well, there's a few questions that kind of spur off of that. Mm-hmm. How much of it do you think is like unintentional bias versus a deliberate attempt to not maliciously misrepresent the product? But for example, if you give me a sword, and I will admit, because viewers have given me swords, and it's one thing when a company's got skin in the game and mm-hmm. they're looking for me to advertise, right? But yeah, I always see it as a completely different thing when somebody from out there in the universe says like, hey, you've done something cool, here's a sword. Mm-hmm. And that has always given me the warm fuzzies, regardless of kind of what it is. And I'm admittedly biased by that because it's hard not to like it when somebody has given you a gift.
Yeah.
And so there's that side of things. And then there's the other side of things where it's like, this sword is shit. What can I focus on that's positive?
Yeah.
Or like, hey, it's shit, I'm just not going to review it. Mm-hmm. And I think that goes into a different category, right? Where
it does. Yeah.
It's not deliberate misrepresentation with the bias being positive. You're not consciously mm-hmm. necessarily aware of it. Yeah. The other one is deliberate, maybe not with malice, but it's deliberate. You've made a choice not to share something bad. More.
Yeah.
And I think is one or the other.
Well, I think it's more of the other. I think it's them just, it's not that it's bad. I think that a lot of even the new guys might even look at something and not even know that's bad because just the experience isn't there. Especially with a lot of, one of the big sellers on medieval European swords that I study extensively and have for, 15 years or more is the oak shot typology. And you got everybody, oh, well, this is a type 18, this is a type 18B, this is a type 12, and this is a style 6 guard, this is a type V pommel. And yeah, a lot of those are simply easily described, but then it's also when you look at it and when you look at it from a historical aspect, it's like, okay, well, there was a reason that certain swords, certain hilt configurations were put together based on, just time period and historical replication. And sometimes when you have guys who are like, oh, well, this sword is really cool. Like a good one, for example, that was actually, I did, it was another sample that I got was the Iron Wolf or Sword Ear. I called it the 15th century type 14 because it was weird because it was the one that kind of everybody gave a hard time because it looked a lot like the Valiant Armory Bristol. And I remember that was the first thing people noticed. I didn't even really notice that it looked like the Bristol at first because it wasn't really clicking. I was more looking at it at why does a type 14 a 13th century to early 14th century sword have a 15th century hilt. And that's what I was more focused on than, hey, this is kind of a copycat of the Bristol, even though it kind of was. And so I think that's something that, a lot of the, new guys kind of will overlook when they're looking at a sword from that one-to-one historical replication. Like maybe I do, and maybe I just take the history a little too serious. That's kind of my niche. But I think those are just little things where it's like someone can look and say, hey, this sword is this, and because this is what they told me. And it's like, well, it's really not. And this is why it kind of doesn't work. And then kind of going from there, if that makes sense.
It does. You're talking about kind of reading the ad copy versus validating it yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? There's a couple comments that have come up, and I earlier committed to try to suck at chat a little less. So I'm gonna try to make good on that. They don't advertise. This is the only way we're able to spread the word about their products. So now, Joe, I just want to clarify. I don't think what Dave is saying is that samples are bad or that he's blaming anyone. It's more. I think this is a bigger conversation about. How do we be good reviewers, right? And I'm always interested in that subject. So if somebody new wants to come in and somebody's got a sample they want to share, how do we do it responsibly, and how do we make the what should they be doing? I guess is from a, not legally, I'm not a lawyer, but like what would we like to see from them? And so I think that's it. Not that they're and Bird mentions this. There's no sword commercials but us. That is true. And I agree with that. And that's one of the things is that swords is kind of such a niche market still a small community, small market that obviously swords sell or there wouldn't be a sword market. But at the same time, it's like, it's not out there. It's not like sports equipment or something like that. I mean, ironically, it kind of is starting because. I don't know. We did actually just tonight, being in Idaho, we just got a Shields like last year. It's like a big thing for Idaho. And I don't know if you guys, but anyway, they have swords at Shields. I mean, they're not the best swords. Most of them are wall hangers, but they got a few like Ronin katana style Viking swords and stuff. And I was looking at that and I was like, well, maybe swords are kind of coming up. Maybe what we're doing has, because I can say being in kind of the sword game for, the 15, 16 years I have, it's definitely bigger than it was. I mean, you go back 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I mean, swords were even nicher. It was hard to find. I think a lot of what we've, like you, Matt, especially, and a few other like the sword YouTubers and Sword Buyers Guide and all that, I think it's really in My Armory and all the forums really built up the sword industry, and we are the advertisers. I agree with that. A lot of the word of mouth helps. But go ahead. I honestly, I don't. That's a fair point, and I don't know if that's true. There's this community of like collectors and people that are interested in swords, and yes, to your point, I think most of the people in that community that do research and happen upon videos will say, hey, I saw a video. And so in this like little small world of people who look at the videos and are interested in the subject and maybe want more than one. Yes. But I can't, there are so many companies making swords all day, every day, right? Albion's backed up for years. You've got domestic producers, you've got Chinese producers. There have to be like tens of thousands or maybe hundreds of thousands of swords produced every single year. And they have to be bought by somebody. Yeah. Meanwhile, Sword Buyer's Guide has like 30 online members at any given time.
Yeah.
Facebook pages that are interested have, sometimes in the high 10,000s of members. Some YouTube channels have, millions of subscribers, but have, they still get tens or hundreds of thousands of views, not millions. It's still somewhere. I get the feeling that in this particular market, the overwhelming majority of people are like, we're the people that review hamburgers on the internet. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But very few people listen to reviews about them. You know what I mean? That's kind of how it works. Because otherwise I can't I can't fathom how many swords are made that then go somewhere, and then they must go to somebody. And
Yeah, exactly. And that's where I'm, and that's the thing is, in that, we've kind of having like a lot of the behind the scenes stuff that we've had, with like Paul and Chris Goggin of Ronin, when they did their little behind the scenes of Long Quan, and it just showed the factory line, and just how just boom, 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 the swords are mass produced, at least in China, but windlass is the same way. I don't know if you remember, I still have a few of them, but back when you'd get like a windlass sword from museum replicas directly, it'd come with a little DVD, the Forged in Fire or something. Do you remember those? And it would show you how windlass made swords, and they'd all be, just the guys hammering away and all that. So obviously, yeah, a lot of swords are made, batches, and people are buying them, but then again, also, where are those people, because they're obviously not, if I guess, if we had a survey on how many people had a sword on the wall, then we could check a box and kind of this discussion. But there's got to be
to get it on the census,
Yeah, there's got to be something, because there's no way. For example, a high-end maker like Albion, if they're if $2,000 to $3,000 swords are out of everybody's price range and nobody's buying them, then why are they always sold out? Why are they always the wait list?
I've been to the factory. It is not a small place. There's not like a huge amount of people that work there, but how many swords can 10 or 20 people make in a year, when that's all they do all day, every day?
Exactly.
Probably a lot, there's a fair amount of things that come out of that place, and enough to keep everyone busy for a real long time.
Well,
but it touches on a different subject, and this is kind of what is coming up in the chat a little bit. And maybe the root of the question is, what should a reviewer do? And I'm not asking from like a legal perspective, but I'm asking, in your opinion, what is a reviewer obligated to do if they are reviewing a sword?
Well, I don't think there's an obligation as much as there's just what you're trying to do is get the facts out. I mean, at least that's what I do with a sword. I look at it from a perspective, like my focus is historical. So if you watch one of my reviews, whether you like it or not, I don't know if a lot of people like it. I'm assuming they do because of the people that watch and subscribe, but I have a whole historical overview, I call it. And basically I'll go through and I will detail the sword by its typology, its guard style, where it's from, who I think might have used it, or what region might have used it, what battle it could have been from. Of course, that's more easy to do when it's like a one-to-one replica on something, kind of like the Royal Armory swords behind me, because we know where that one came from, unlike like this one that was like just kind of, that's a Jesse Bleski, custom. There's nothing to it. I mean, it still has a stylization that's historical, but it's not like I can say, oh, well, this was in 1400, this was in the, this war or something. With that, that's a lot of the fluff, but really what breaks down the sword is just, okay, is it a good sword? And I think that's what we've always looked at. And as reviewers is it put together well? Is it made of good steel? Is it going to survive cutting and all that? Is it, as I mentioned, historically accurate to what it's supposed to replicate or represent? Can you hold it in your hand and say, well, this is a sword rather than just a sharpened crowbar like we used to say back in the day? And that's where I look at with reviews, and that's what most reviews focus on is, okay, does it work? Does it use? Is it a sword? And I think that's one of the things, like with a lot of reviewers, that to an extent, the review samples are beneficial in that sense, because it might not be something that you're used to or that's in your wheelhouse. Like you're real, you're primarily Japanese, with the katanas and things. If someone kind of threw you an oddball and gave you like a scimitar or something, or a basket. Yeah, I know you got them, but you know what I mean. But like, let's say like if it was something that's out of your wheelhouse, or like a real obscure like African sword, and they said, "Here, review this. Tell me what you think." That's gonna be completely out of your expertise. You're gonna be, but you're primarily going to still, no matter what the shape or size is, you're still going to look at it as a sword. Does it cut? Does it handle well? And does it feel like a sword? Does it look like a sword?
And I think that's fair. I do think when the words matter, right?
Yeah.
And so I think a review is an important, it means something if you're going to review a thing. And I don't think that means that you have to break it or that you even have to use it. But I do think you owe honesty and your opinion, right?
Yeah.
And so if you're reading exclusively ad copy, I don't necessarily think that that's bad in so long as it doesn't differ from your opinion, right?
Yeah.
There is a sense of viewer beware, right? If somebody is not an expert yet espouses themselves to be, you got to be wary of that. Likewise, if there's somebody who isn't an expert and they still put something out, you can take what's useful and move on. But I do think if you're gonna put review in the title, that your honest opinion is kind of at a bare minimum what you should be putting in. And where I would say there's some if there's bias, ideally it's disclosed, but people aren't, I don't know, I understand people get really irritated because the attention span of some YouTube viewers is not more than 2 minutes long.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
I struggle to get through disclaimers in less than 5 minutes. So it does make for a bit of a dredge to go through all of the things that a person might want to hear before they actually hear what you have to say. So I get it. But still, so long as you're actually giving your opinion in a review, I don't think it's bad. And where I would caution folks that are going to get samples and stuff is, if you're going to review it, then just be honest. And if it's not good, unfortunately, that means you may have you may burn a few bridges, right? That's kind of the risk in doing it. But if you call it a review, then your honest opinion. If your opinion is that this is not good, then that should come through in some way, shape, or form. If it doesn't, then you haven't really done a review. And
that's one thing that we point across too, and that I think especially on the kind of the Sword Buyer's Guide written review side, I noticed, especially reading a lot of those reviews, everything was for the price. I know you and me have even said that in our videos. I've watched your video say, well, for the price, is it good or bad? And price does matter, because for example, if for example, you're going to have an Albion that's $3,000, it better be a lot more than the $300 windlass, because if it's not, what the hell did I pay for? And I think that's where a lot of people are at with that too. I think one of the hard things too is, and this is where my bias can kind of come in, and it's not intentional bias either, but I see, I got all my swords behind me here. And I bought every one of those swords because I liked it. I looked at it online, I researched it, I watched reviews, I did all that. I bought that sword because I liked it. Now I'm reviewing it. Now I'm reviewing a sword I like. So that's where a lot of people might say, oh, well, you just like that sword. Well, of course, I bought it because I liked it, and I knew I would like it. Now I'm trying to share to you why you would like it too. And I think that's where a lot of people can be like, oh, well, maybe even on my end where they're like, oh, well, he's a fanboy, especially like with windlass. I buy a lot of windlass. It's not that I'm, a fanboy, or they don't give me review samples. I just, for the price point, because I've always been kind of a budget buyer, $300, $400 is kind of usually where I try to keep my budget. They've always been the best as far as medieval, as far as at least me, and my treatment from them, from museum replicas as a dealer, as a vendor. I've just always had a good customer service relationship with them. Call me biased for that or not, I guess. But at the same time, it's like, okay, well, why? Well, because I saw it and I liked it, so I reviewed it that way. If that makes sense, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a common idea that people can only be biased in one way. Like, I got a free thing. So I either want to preserve the relationship that gave you the free thing, so I get more free things, or I'm overwhelmed with the generosity and want to say nice things because I see it as a gift and it makes me feel good, like I'm, like I've arrived. I got a review sample, right? And so there's those positive vibes that come in, and that can absolutely be true. Yeah. Flip side, if you review things that you like, then you have a bias because you like them. That's why you bought it. And so if you spend your money you're one, kind of predisposed to liking it because that's why you bought it.
Yeah.
But two, there's also the bias of like, I don't want to be stupid, and I want to justify that I spent my money well.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to like prove to myself that this is a good thing. And there's that bias that comes from like reviewing the stuff that you own and bought with your own money. There's a bias that can exist either way. Just that's why it's important to disclose. Like as a viewer, you should know that can exist either way. There's just like anything else, there's a scale and a spectrum, and it can be good or bad on either side, right?
Well, yeah, it's kind of like
you can have bias. If you pay for it, you can have bias, and they can all fuck with what you think about the thing.
Well, absolutely. Well, look at it this way. I mean, this would be a fun one. We should have like a sword tuber challenge to where let's have like a chat thing where like we got to convince like a bunch of people that think swords are stupid why they're not stupid and why they're cool. That would be kind of a fun one.
So women, you just mean women then, right?
Women. Oh, well, you just got to find the right woman. I did. She likes swords. Half of these are hers, or at least she claims them.
It's an odds game, and I realize there's a bit of stereotyping happening. So for all the ladies out there that love swords, and based on my YouTube demographic outline, the 5 of you out of 50,000 that like swords, I apologize. I did not mean to generalize all women. However, if you go into like, there was some comedy skit that I saw, and it was like, hey, what would be a good gift for a man? And like one dude in the audience was like, unequivocally, there's one gift. It is a sword. She's like, that's ridiculous. And then she asked the audience, like, what man would want a sword here? And they're all like, yeah.
Yeah, every man, exactly. Especially when it's like that movie sword, or something they grew up with. Conan, everybody wants the Atlantean. Of course they do. Even if they don't.
So, but you go into I'm just saying, if you played the odds, it's entirely possible that you would find a guy that isn't interested in swords and wouldn't enjoy that gift. But chances are there's a pretty strong possibility that the dude, even if he's not interested in swords, is going to be like, pretty fucking cool. That's a sword.
It is, absolutely.
Absolutely. You give a sword to a lady and they're going to be like, there's a very strong possibility what the hell are you doing?
Well, I think it's a man thing anyway. I don't want to sound chauvinistic here, but I think it's a man thing anyway. I think it's in our DNA to, war and because that's just, it's in our DNA, our ancestors, all of that, It's why we're attracted to weapons, even if the horror of using them is over our heads. Because who wants to dice someone up with a sword? It's not. We have
one lady here that's saying I love swords. Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That woman. Well, I'm biased now because that's my girlfriend. That's Brianna. That's my girlfriend. So. So we're cheating, Matt. We're cheating. We're getting girls that we're getting our own supporters to say we
that's all good.
Skew our statistics.
My wife tolerates swords. I wouldn't say I won't go.
My ex-wife did too. But that's also why she's an ex-wife. So, but yeah. But anyway, But I mean, that's something that's like. Like I said, the guy thing, we look at weapons and it's just like cool because we're kind of raised to, in all that, and just G.I. Joe, all that stuff, it's cool. It's the guy thing. And I know that's changing now and kind of as kind of the kind of the things are changing in the era of the world, but for the most part, I still think that's just it's not necessarily just a guy thing, but women can like them too. A lot of them do. Look at women in martial arts. Like you who frequents dojos. What would you say your ratio is like in your dojo of male
between
to female?
10 and 30% are women.
30%. So see, that's a pretty high.
On the high, low. There's usually always some ladies there though.
It was the same thing in my judo class, and like I said, I'm in a town with less than, even when I was in judo in high school, I would say that maybe we had 3,000 people in this town, and half the class were women. There was more women than you would think that just wanted to do something, be active, I guess, or women that go to the gym. There's a lot of women that do appreciate physical activity or history, or even TV shows. It's like how many women love The Witcher, not just because it's Mr. Big Sexy Henry Cavill in it. They like the story and they like the whatever, or video games that play like medieval or fantasy theme video games like Skyrim and stuff like that. There's lots.
I'm never gonna not think of Henry Cavill as Big Sexy now. I did not. You're not wrong. But yes. So,
but yeah, no, I hear it all the time. That's one of my girls' favorites. So, and so that's always kind of the thing. Him and Jensen Ackles, who does the Soldier Boy on The Boys. So, but it works because I want to watch those shows and she wants to check them out. She likes the shows too, but same thing. But yeah.
Potato.
Exactly.
I watched Superman for the story. Oh, sure.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Going back closer to the topic that we have.
Yes.
So reviews, we've talked a little bit about maybe the obligation, but if you are getting somebody who's reading an ad copy, right?
Mm-hmm.
As a buyer and a person that goes out there's a new win list thing that comes out, and somebody shows pictures, espouses how much they love it, they got it for free.
Mm-hmm.
They're just shilling for Big Sword. Is because this is so niche, is that still useful to you as you personally? Is something better than nothing?
I think it is, absolutely, because one of the big things, it's why like, I know I keep going back to written reviews because I think they matter, because I know video kind of changed things, but written reviews, the lamest written review was one without pictures, and you would get all that information. You could have a whole 5-paragraph review, but if you didn't have pictures, it was boring. You want to see the sword, you want to see what it is, and I think that's one of the big things. I mean, even if we didn't talk the whole video and we just pulled out the sword and look at this, I think that would get us just as many views, because that's what people want to see. They want to see the sword. They want to see, it's the this is the so and so sword. Does it look like it? Yeah, well, let's see. And yeah, that is cool. I want that. Is the handle blue? Is the handle two-handed? Can he hold it with two hands? I don't see a measurement for the handle. I can't tell in the internet picture if it's one or two-handed. Oh, well, here's David or Matt holding it with two hands. Okay, it must be two-handed, unless they got little tiny hands, So yeah, I think that the visual is the big key, and I think that's why videos have always kind of spiked up, and video reviews are definitely more popular now than the written reviews ever were, because it's the visual. You get to see the up close in person. You get to see the angles and all that, and I think that's what matters. So I think even with someone that is completely just, because some of the websites or vendors do have their own websites, like Swordier, Alex, he's always talking about his sword, showing his swords off. Museum Replicas used to do it. They don't really post anymore. Cult of Athena is a big one. They have I can't remember his name, but he's a pretty cool kid. And he's always talking swords and, hey, this is the new sword that Cult of Athena just got. And he's swinging it around and talking and stuff. So I think the visual is what's important, even if it comes from, the actual vendor. One of the things that I've done is that I started, and I know it's not getting a lot of views, but I know some people are liking it and watching it, is the sword news. I don't know if you've seen that, Matt, my new little segment called Sword News. But yeah, that's what I'm focused on is more about, hey, what's on the market, what to buy, stuff that's not getting viewed, kind of like that first comment we got that said there's no advertising for swords. There's no, well, why not? Let's make it,
legal. That's the short answer. You can't advertise weapons.
Yeah, but you can, you can't advertise weapons, but at the same time, I know you can't sell them either, because that's what's kind of with YouTube and stuff. But at the same time, we're not advertising as much as we're just presenting, I guess. And present,
No, that's I think, why samples, right?
Yeah.
I've wondered the same thing, because I look at somebody sends me a $500 sword, right? And I get 1,000 views from that sword.
Mhm.
Now, in my particular case and a number of other people's cases, they talk about swords exclusively, right?
Mhm.
You don't know much about my personal life unless maybe you've watched me for 10 years and been able to put together all the
Pinpoint
little
together,
tidbits,
yeah.
but I don't generally talk about me or my opinions
Mhm.
about other things. I just focus on swords, and the parts of
Mhm.
me that you know about are the ones that are related directly or tangentially to swords.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so it's very on topic. That means that the people that are watching are probably not necessarily watching because they love my big sexy looks like Henry Cavill, right? They're watching because I talk about the subject they're interested in.
Yes.
And so, okay, you get 1,000 views from people that are probably interested in the product that you're after.
Mhm.
Is it worth like 50 cents a view to send somebody a sword? Is it? And then you look on Google, and if you want to advertise your channel, it costs you more than that to get that many. Like if you want to buy clicks on a thing, they're pretty expensive to buy
Oh, yeah,
clicks.
they're not cheap,
And you can't.
absolutely not.
And that's the other thing is like you can't. It's very difficult, I think, for these companies to advertise anywhere.
Mhm.
For some reason, I see a bunch of katana ads or did on Facebook for a minute. It seemed like a bunch of different katana websites were advertising there, and they've kind of stopped. But um, it's pretty tough to get through. So if you
Mhm.
have a marketing budget and you can't use it, and it's about the same cost as what Google would charge, I guess it makes sense. But
It does,
I
yeah.
can understand why they're sent out from the. I even understand a little bit about the economics of it
Mhm.
uh, because Google's actually pretty expensive to advertise on. But
Yeah.
it is funny. It is a very strange thing. They're generally not commercials for them, other
There's
than
not.
sword news and the reviews and stuff that come out from folks.
Well, yeah, and you will get certain vendors that do ads. I mean, one of them that I've noticed, and yeah, they're more costume, like LARP and Ren Fair stuff, but Medieval Collectibles. I don't know if you ever checked out their website or anything, but I'll be scrolling through just personally browsing YouTube, like little shorts and stuff, on a Sunday or something, and I'll see Medieval Collectibles. I'll see their website come up, and they got a big epic song, and look at all our stuff, and they're not specifically just showing swords, but I mean they're technically still advertising, and they're a sword dealer. I think with a lot of it, yeah, I can see them like, okay, well, the promotion is in reviewers. We give our swords to reviewers. The reviewers are in their hand. They're cutting. They're showing people are going to buy their swords based on recommendation. I see that, but then again, at the same time, why aren't more big and obviously the easy answer is they don't have to, of course, because they're established. But why are the big guys not doing it? Why isn't formally Hanwei passing out review samples? Why isn't Windless? Why isn't Valiant Armory? Why isn't Albion? Why isn't Arms and Armor? Well, and you say, well, they don't have to because they're that big or whatever. Everybody knows their names, but I think it's less that they just obviously the market that we're not privy to is abundant enough to where they don't need to, maybe. But you would think that those were the ones that would be like kind of concerned and be like, I know like with your stream with Peter, you brought it up like, hey, are you guys scared of all these Chinese, the plagiarism, the knockoff argument? And he was like, well, no, because they're not replicating what we're doing. They're and they're obviously not at the volume we are. They got to sell 10 swords to R2, but at the same time, it's like I think that I think a lot of it has to do with just how the Chinese market is and how they just kind of operate with that. I mean, we saw it with the katana market 10 years ago. That's why you're going through it's like you can have a JQ, you can have a Huawei, you can have all these, and are there significant? Can you tell differences? Well, yeah, but can you really, if you don't have the experience? No, they're all just katanas. They're all budget katanas. They're pretty much similar. And when you see how they're made, they're all kind of made the same way. And I'm seeing that with these new medieval swords, like the Sword Ears and the Romance of Men's. You've handled way more than me. I've only handled a few. But that's what really was the eye opener to me is when I got my review samples from Paul that were, Ryujin / Iron Wolf, and then all of a sudden well, no, they're not. They're sword ears. Well, whose are they? Because, I sent you that private video I did for him, and I was like, I don't know who I'm sending this to, but here's my, here's who I am. And because I didn't know. And even Paul didn't know. He's like, well, I'm pretty sure it's Samsung with Ryujin, but it could be Alex from Sword Ear now, because it's just this big forge in Longquan making all these things, and they're passing them out. So it's kind of like the Ryan sword katana thing. It's like, how many Ryan swords are really just Ryan swords, and how many really are so and so on eBay with a seller name. You know what I mean? But yeah.
Yeah, I always kind of got the impression the off-brand ones that sold on eBay, you have to imagine there's scrap, right?
Yeah.
There's things that don't go as planned.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're trying to make a brand and then something doesn't pass QC, and QC has been a problem, and so I'd hazard a guess that people in the US see like, oh, how did this cracked saw make it through? Or how did this blade with the hamon that goes too close to the edge make it through? Or this blemish or this or that. And that's what has passed QC. There's definitely some level of QC. So what didn't pass? And then you have folks that say, well, I saw the same sword on Temu for $100 instead of $300.
Yeah.
Why not buy that? Well, it could be the same thing, or it could be the B stock or the C stock or the D stock,
Yeah.
It could be something that like, oh yeah, that heat treatment went horribly bad. We'll put them on, we'll sell the batch cheap to somebody else, and then they'll do whatever, and they end up on Temu for $100.
Hence all the European woes about.
Yeah, there are a number of them that, to your point, are looking very similar and appear to be made very similar and have the same kind of modular parts that you see in the katana, but they're also different. There's different shapes and fullers, and they seem to be made of, I don't know, kind of sucking from the same teeth, so to speak.
Yeah.
That's maybe a poor analogy, but you get the idea that they seem to be drawing from the same source. It's not different hands that seem to be making them. The stitching looks the same. The leather appears to be the same. Like the root suppliers of many of these things appear to be very, very similar.
And that's kind of just that, my experience with, with Paul Southern and on the Sword Buyer's Guide side, being on the inside, because, when I was kind of privy to that, and I kind of saw that. I was like, well, and one of the big ones is someone that, you did a lot of reviews for, Chris Scoggins with Ronin Katana, because he was acting like he was the diamond in the rough when it came to Chinese stuff. And of course it was all bullshit. And it took us a while to figure that out. But at the same time, what really caught him is when the forge that he was sourcing from, started selling their own swords. And I don't know if you remember, but a few years ago well, I guess it was longer than that. Hell, it's been almost 10 years ago. They were being sold under the Kawashima brand. And, they're still on, you can still find them on Amazon. I mean, here, I'll kind of move the camera a little bit. That two-handed 18E there, that Danish, that's one of them. I mean, that was originally sold as a Ronin, and then it was
Crom Killer.
What's the Crom Killer? Yeah, you remember the Crom Killer, and then all of a sudden the Crom Killer was on Cult of Athena for $200 less, and it was under and there was no name for it. And then when everyone was asking, well, what's the name? Oh, well, the forge wants to be called Kawashima. And then next thing, everybody started calling them Kawashimas. And now they got a whole different other name on Amazon. You look it up on Amazon. I bought that one from Amazon for $150. And it's the same sword that Cult of Athena was selling for $175, and the same sword that Ronin was selling for $4, saying it was the exclusive Crom Killer. And that's what I'm kind of what I was reiterating with a lot of these Chinese swords. And that's where I know I've given a few of the vendors a hard time. I know even in the comments, because, I was on that side. And what offended me the most is I tried to help, because I wanted to see them succeed. I mean, I said that in that private video I sent you. I was like, I want you guys to succeed so there can be so you guys can make something that everyone can enjoy, but have it be authentic and prove that it can be made in budget parameters, because it can, because it's, you know, it's not difficult once you have the numbers, especially with CNC milling and stuff. It's just shaping and grinding at that point. But I was like, okay, so let's try, let me, you know, especially on the typology side, I was like, let me show you what needs to be done to make a real medieval sword. And then they're like, thanks for all the feedback, and then nothing. Then all of a sudden I see them, you know, using the Oakshot typology to sell their swords without any proper knowledge of it. One of the big funny ones, and I know I'm rambling, so I'll cut it after this sentence, was you know, one of the vendors came up with this bright idea that he had invented a sword type because he made a hybrid 18B 20 type 20 sword. And I was like, well, there's no real such thing. That's not how the typology works, but you technically made a 20A. And it was like, oh, well, but that just shows that, you know, you basically took something and as a sales pitch and then just rolled with it without any knowledge of it. And it became unauthentic. And maybe that's where my kind of more aggressive bias comes from with a lot of the Chinese vendors. It's just, you know, it was like, you could do it so right. And even Peter said that in your video, do it right and be a proper competitor rather than stealing our sword, getting all the statistical data on it, and then making it in your shop. You know, that's not the same. It might be beneficial to those guys that want a $300 sword that looks like an Albion, but it doesn't really help, you know, the market itself, because nobody's learning anything. And it would be better if they learned and made it better rather than, you know, not, I guess, if that makes any sense. I know I'm rambling. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. That is the name of the stream. Incidentally, yeah. It is the random ramble stream. So that is fine. If people come here expecting something other than sword rambles, then you are in the wrong place. But there's a few things to unpack there. Right? Ronin, I do remember the Crom Killer, and so going back to that, I remember it was $500, but it was also the first thing. And there's in the background here, there's a structure of procuring product and developing it and being the first and taking a risk on it, and little things that the forge can probably gouge you on and then, you know, undercut you and sell it somewhere else. Mm-hmm. That's just the nature of the game. So I'm not begrudging a company that's in it to make money, right? Like, that's why we're all here. Yeah. That's what initially, like you mentioned, we talk about reviews like for the money. That is the lens by which most people judge everything. You don't buy anything. There's nothing that you do where like the value isn't in question. Yeah. Anytime there's an exchange, a product, you don't go to McDonald's and then expect the same dining experience as a 5-star restaurant. You don't go there and be like, well, you know, the way that I had to like tell them what I wanted, like standing up at the front. That's part of the experience. And why? Because I mean, it's probably more expensive than it was, but at the same time, like you're not spending the same amount of money. And so you expect something fundamentally different. If your brother's, mother's, cousin's, sister's ex-roommate from college helps you fix your plumbing, you might not be surprised if a little shit bubbles up in your shower. You know, like that's kind of you didn't call it professional. Yeah. You called some guy that could do it for cheap. And so there's a level of expectation that you have with everything for price, and swords just aren't immune to that. And so when you say like it's good for the money, that's just I think the way people shop for anything is if it presents a good value. And unlike the thing that isn't true with swords is that one, well, I guess it can be true. I've had some really shitty, very expensive meals, but a lot of times you do get what you pay for, and that just hasn't always been the case with swords. And there might be a logical reason for it. The Crom Killer, Chris was the first one, or Ronin Katana, I should say, was the first one to sell that product. And so maybe there's a gamble in like getting the tooling ready, and he bears that cost. I don't know the whole story, but there's maybe a reason other than greed that goes into why it might cost money. And then like once it's all developed, somebody can make it for cheaper, and but I don't know. It
Yeah,
could be,
yeah, exactly.
it could be
And
something else.
that's the behind the scenes stuff that we,
Yeah, don't know.
I'm trying to get involved
I
in.
try to evaluate the product though, and incidentally, the Crom Killer was not my favorite. Whether
Yeah.
it's even if it was $50, that sword is still heavy and not particularly fun to move around.
And
In
that's what's
contrast to
funny.
like the Dane or like something else, it's still just not a fun sword.
It's not.
But
And
Ronin does
that's
make
what's
fun swords. I still think their Dojo Pro makes. I still think even though they're a little more expensive, they've always been durable and generally pretty solid stuff for the money.
Oh yeah, I have one too. I've always enjoyed Ronin, Ronin swords. I think one of the big things is, and that's where I think a lot of the arguments can get a little, because the focus is swords. We shouldn't be making enemies. We're not, like I said, it's dumb to make enemies. I don't want to make enemies, even though I kind of was.
Sword prices matter.
Well, they do. Yeah, I think they do. But at the same time, price is subjective. Thaisuke, perfect example that you reviewed. I never even touched one of those things, but looking at them on Cult of Athena for $2,000, just pictures, even 5 years ago, 10 years ago, when I didn't even have the experience I have now, I wouldn't have bought one. I'm looking at it like, that looks like a $300 sword for $2,000. Why? So yeah, so price is subjective, but price does matter too, because if you don't get what you pay for, then yeah, the price, I'll tell you right now, and you see this all the time when like high-end stuff gets reviewed, doesn't matter if it's swords or not. Biggest mistake, biggest peak of junk in my life. Why did I even try? I should have known better, because it had issues and or a limit, and like I said, nobody's perfect. Even Albions aren't perfect. Oh, it's got a warp in the blade. Oh, it's, the grip's lopsided. Well, stuff happens. Stuff misses QC. Everybody has a smoke break. God, I need another cup of coffee Friday. It gets thrown in the box. I want to go home. That's where, it's like, yeah, but so yeah, price does matter. If I'm paying $1,000, it better look a lot prettier than a $300 sword. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that it has to. I mean, maybe our expectation's too high. Sometimes we get that. And I think I saw that a lot with, especially in the katana market, because you remember when katanas were really going for really cheap, it's like the Musashis, the Shirakawas were those 1065, 1060 differential hard, and they had a real Haman and alternating Ito, which was like, just the alternating Ito was enough to get everyone like, wow, this is so much better than that piece of crap I had before, because the handle ain't sliding off and crap, or it ain't glued on or something. Or the sai actually fit without rattle, and I could hold it upside down and it not fall out and almost kill me. Those little touch is at $125, 10 years ago was like big. And it's like, well, what else do I need? It does everything it's supposed to do. Plus it cuts through whatever water bottle we're going to doing. So what do I need that? But and that's where I think a lot of people get confused on the swords, and that's where like they can kind of covet the cheaper stuff a little stronger. And it's like, so somebody would be like, well, your sword's not a Nihonto. It's not a Shinsokuro or whatever, it's not made in Japan. It's just a Chinese dojo sword. No, it's special. It's something special, because they want that value, that perceived value of what they got's worth it. And I think sometimes when they see that, okay, well, because usually there's tiers, $100, like $300, $500, $1,000. You start seeing significant changes in those price brackets, and sometimes in those middle brackets from 100 to 500, you don't really see as much. You might not see the details, and then that kind of gets people upset. Like, why did I spend $500 for this if it ain't any better than my $100 sword? But really it is because of the materials used and the heat treatment and the attention to details that they're not noticing, because they're just looking at it at a surface level.
I think you're touching on a good point about where reviewers can maybe help, right? And
Yeah.
the sword market is one of those things where, like, at a base level, like the $60 Musashi sword that might be $100 now because inflation or whatever, is probably going to meet most people who just want a sword's needs, right? The idea that you can spend more money and get something that like scales with that money is true with most things that you buy that are kind of like the products you buy made in China, right? You buy if you buy the $300 phone, the $1,000 phone is going to be faster and prettier looking, and will I don't know that it'll last longer, but it'll probably be updated for longer or something. The car, if you buy the cheapest one, it probably goes point A to point B, but the next one is faster and maybe has a better warranty and maybe does something else special. Swords just aren't like that, though, right? You can spend, under $500, you can get a sword that cuts and lasts a long time and does all the sword things pretty well. And then you start spending more money and you don't necessarily get more. It doesn't necessarily do any of those things better. It might be made of better materials. It might be made by somebody who knows what they're doing. There might be a little more spit shine or, some level of refinement. But a lot of times those are really subtle and don't, like, oh, the gap in the crossguard is smaller. It costs $1,000 more. Like,
is that worth it?
Yeah.
It depends on the person. Depends on the person. Because there's some people that'll sit there and they'll review a sword like a windlass or something and be like, this thing sucks. And well, why does it suck? And because the crossguard's gapped and the leather's cheap and the peen's rough and there's waviness in the blade because they didn't perfectly smooth out and polish it out. Well, that's what you're paying or at least that's what you should be paying for when you're paying $1,000, $2,000. That there should be no waviness because they went over it 1,000 times or whatever. That's what you're paying for. And I think that's kind of the case because, but to your point, I love using cars because everybody always likes to say, oh, well, the budget swords, a Hyundai and a high-end sword or a custom sword is like a Ferrari. But, in that vein of it, and I always love using cars because no matter what, the speed limit is 65. Can both cars go 65? Absolutely. You're going to feel fast driving 65? Not really, but you're 65 with it. So, but at the same time, they're both made of the same materials. One might have a little prettier, but I'll tell you right now, your fender bender, that Hyundai is going to get just as dented as that Ferrari, if not worse. It's not like the Ferrari's impervious to damage because it's a Ferrari and you paid more. But that's also with the high-end swords. And that's what I'm saying. Like, you can break a $300 sword on a stump or something, but more than likely, you're not guaranteed that $1,000 sword's not going to break the same because it is technically made of the same material, same heat treatment, same Rockwell hardness, things like that. So, if that makes sense, but
it does, and there's actually some comparisons to draw there. Like often, like a Ferrari, people buy them and then park them and try to resell them and make money after 50 years. There's a different
the Albion market, basically.
There's plenty of people I think that use Albions, and
there is
people that just want a good sword, and that happens to be a good one. The windlass one, I think early on, and this has changed because I would say the Royal Armories line in particular changed my perspective on windlass a bit. Earlier, if I talk about some of the reviews that I made 10, 15 years ago, windlass sucked. I mean, they in silhouette looked like a sword, right? Yeah. And the options were different. It's not the same market. Windlass has evolved as well, but we travel back in time. Windlass was there, and they were there long before that too. But the swords that they made for $200 were in silhouette like a sword, but they did not have like a level of ergonomics or refinement that made them comfortable to use. Dynamically, they were missing all the things. They were cumbersome and crowbar-esque to move around. They basically didn't incorporate the right kind of tapering. Heat treatment was reasonable because it was soft, but like it wasn't. I wouldn't say they were super inconsistent on the heat treatment of the blade,
Mm-hmm.
but they weren't always great. And then they would often, if they didn't peen them, they would have like a wire nut that was welded on that would break. Or
Yeah.
something about that area was often a weak spot. So if you use the sword and actually hit something with it, there's a strong possibility that it would, in some way, shape, or form, come apart.
Yeah.
And so that is, I think, where like my early impressions of windlass being not great. All the other things you said are also critiques of windlass. The gap in the crossguard, the waviness, the leather being cheap, like all of that also. But all of those, I think you can kind of excuse. The fact that like the sword feels like a hammer and not like a sword, and that if I hit something with it, the pommel might fall off. Those are the realistic grievances that I think I would have with windlass. But recently, the Royal Armories, it's like, oh, okay, well, instead of $200, you could spend $400 and then get a fucking amazing sword. Like, what? Why were you doing this the whole time? Like,
well, I'll tell you right now. I'll tell you a little insider information I got. And this was from Mr. Windlass himself. This was a quote from him. And he basically said, because I had the same thing, because Windlass has, they can make anything. And I remember and it wasn't direct. The original question wasn't directly for me, but I also kind of re-asked it one time. And I said, if you can make a really nice sword, why aren't you? And he said, well, because I want to make cheap swords that everyone can afford. And that was kind of why they were going for like the 200 mark. And then I was like, so, because I mean, that's the thing. I mean, you want me to pull out a sword? I'll show a good example. Yeah. Okay. Here we go. So, there's a Royal Armory sword. Here is a 20-year-old windlass sword. And then here is one of their new swords. So kind of like we were saying, these are the windlass swords that you hated. These are the chunky, has that weird ricasso. I've been working on the grip because the grip was really like gripping like that. It was like for bare hands. You know, it's got that rough peen. You know, it's got this weird like sheen on it, so it never rusts, but it always looks weirdly over shiny. And then, you know, getting rid of that guy.
Like a sword, all of that would be excusable. You know, like if it were just ground in a way that like didn't feel terrible.
And that
okay.
Yeah. And you know, and then you go and you have, like you said, like, you know, the Royal Armies, you reviewed these, I reviewed these. You know, this one gets a lot of heat because, you know, this is as like with your Azure Forge review, you know, it's like, well, who does this belong to? Well, legally, the sword belongs to Royal Armories. It's in the Royal Armories. Did Albion make a version of it? Absolutely, they did. And they called it the Kingmaker. Did they tweak it a little bit? Yes. Did Azure make it? Yeah. Did they make it off the Kingmaker rather than the actual Royal Armories sword? Yes. Does it look a lot like the Henry V sword, or technically, I don't even call that the Henry V sword, because when you go historically, it's the Westminster Abbey sword. But anyway, it does, because it follows the same, Style 9 Family F, hilt family. That's got the curved guard and the wheel pommel, which was really popular in England in the 100 Years' War. But yeah, I mean, you look at the refinement of this to that, and I mean, it's night and day. I mean, it's literally it's not the same sword as that one I just had. And then you have this sword, and this sword's like $500. So as you said, you know, it's like spend more, you get a little more. But then you have this sword that, you know, I just recently reviewed, the Seneschal, which is like $300. Same price as their windlass Type 14 that I reviewed. I think you reviewed. Everybody's reviewed. And now you got this guy. Now you got this guy that is, you know, I mean, the wasted grip, the pommel, the peening, all that. $300.
Yeah.
What's going on, you know? And this is where they can make them. They just don't, because they want to keep it fast and they want to keep it in budget. That's the answer I got. Can they? Yeah. Can they make Ableon level swords? Absolutely. Can they make Arms and Armor level swords? Sure, but they don't because they just like being budget. I guess it's more cost productive for them. That's the best answer I got when I asked them. I was like, why, because they make really nice swords. They can make really nice swords. It's almost insulting. It's almost like having like a Rembrandt level artist draw SpongeBob cartoons. And then
it's SpongeBob.
What do you mean? You know what I mean. It's like, just like kind of
I get what you're throwing down. Like
a Renaissance level painter that can like just paint works of art, but they're doing, simple cartoons. It's like, what are you doing?
I could paint the greatest works in human history, but instead I choose to draw dicks on an underpass.
There you go. Exactly.
I understand what you're saying. It's just, fortunately now they make the museum replicas line. And if they were capable of more, I would love to see if they just threw something out there, did an experiment that said like, the windlass super high end series. I don't know, find some marketing. The echelon series. They're in a different, I don't know, something bougie. And then make something really amazing, price it accordingly so that it justifies the time and expense. But the Royal Armory showed me that they can absolutely make them, and that they're at like spending $200 on a sword is kind of the base level thing. And for a time, that was the only option. You had windlass, and then you had maybe Depika or some other stuff. Well, Hanwei didn't like the Type 14 is, I think, a good example. The Hanwei was different than the windlass. The windlass had the appearance of a Type 14. And that was why I was drawn to it. I remember I bought it on like a museum replicas daily or weekly special or something like that. And it looked really cool. And it had that
for $100.
It had the silhouette of it. But then I got it in the hand and I was like, oh no, this is not good at all. I don't like anything about what I'm feeling in my hand.
Well, one thing, and I wanted to point on this too, and I know like we've gone down the rabbit hole, I guess, as far as like off topics. This is kind of more on topic. This is more on.
I believe we were talking about dicks on an underpass. Somehow we started. Makes a good review.
We'll get to that. We'll carry our cameras. We'll go try to find some. I got a train yard over here. I might be able to find a few, but one of the things I wanted to point out is with historical accuracy, swords are man-made. Not all swords are works of art. Not all swords are pretty. Not all historical swords are pretty. Were they used? Yeah. But just because, for example, like the Royal Armory sword here, was that a beautiful sword that's been preserved extremely well in a museum? Absolutely. Was it more than likely a noble sword? So yeah, that's the Ferrari there. Even if windlass is replicating, or as your forge is replicating, it's still its consistency and its fit and finish is a high level sword. It was somebody's sword of importance. That was a noble sword. It was a very pretty, very well put together sword. Not all swords were put together. You could go and you could, for example, sit there and go to a museum and see this sword, a similar sword built like this, thick, chunky, hammered together, lopsided, goofy shape to the pommel. And you could get that and see that in a museum and it just completely throw you off. And I think that's where the dishonesty comes in with a lot of what we focus on. Because I think one of the big things that swords these days has kind of fallen on is performance swords and performance-based swords, cutting competitions, things like that. It's like, for example, what's everyone's favorite sword as far as medieval swords go today, as far as like competition cutters? The Type 18C. Everybody loves the Type 18C, the Alexandria Type 18C, big broad blade, perfect for cutting, great for tatami, cutting competitions, things like that. But then again, how many Type 18Cs do you really see in museums or seeing examples in art or even in descriptions of medieval warfare and things like that? You don't, so was it really that popular of a sword historically? Kind of not, or you would see more of them. What do we see more of? Well, we see a crap load of like Type 12s. We see a crap load of standard Type 18s. We see a crap load of Type 16s. Really popular swords that were like tested Type 15s, long and pointy, that passed the test of time. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't look at is just because a sword's crappy doesn't mean it wasn't a sword. Or if you're replicating a one-to-one replica of a sword, do you take out the crappy, even though that's how that original smith made it? And I think that's where sometimes like the Albions and Peter Johnson and things like that, when he says his swords are next gen, he's not lying. He kind of worded that in your guys' interview, and I caught on to it. Because he basically said, I review the sword. I go to the museum and I look at the sword and I get all the statistical data, the sword dynamics, as he calls it. And there's some things that aren't right, some things that are a little lopsided, some things that, maybe that distal taper that, everyone enjoys because it does make a better sword just might not be there on that sword. So then he adds it because now it's the next gen. Does it make the sword better? Absolutely. Is it a serious one-to-one replica? Well, no, it's not, because it doesn't replicate that sword anymore. And I think that's something that, Peter kind of tongue-in-cheek that, and no offense, I'm not trying to offend anybody, but I think you guys kind of misunderstood or didn't catch on to that. That's why he said, don't look at Albions like historical replicas, one-to-one replicas, because they're not. I don't make them that way. I take a sword and I make it a Peter Johnson sword. I make it better. And that's not even ego. And like, I'm not like calling, like saying he has an ego or anything. I'm saying he's doing that on purpose because he understands the sword and he understands this will make it work better in the modern guy's hand when he goes out to cut that to Tommy or whatever, if that makes sense.
A company is selling to a modern audience, right? And you're absolutely right. Like there were big old trash burgers out there and some of them broke, and what survived probably at least didn't have shitty tangs and were made to survive anyway.
Yeah.
But
or weren't used at all.
Yeah, sure.
Been on a hip for their whole life,
There's a number of different things, but the modern audience appreciates a certain thing. And if you watch a historical epic, there's not beautiful damsels with unibrows and armpit hair either, right?
Absolutely.
There's some adjustments that have been made to make it appealing to a modern audience. The same thing is kind of happening with swords. People, even historical folks that are, that's not true. The people that are appreciating like a historically made artifact will appreciate it if it's derpy in the hand or if it's lively. They want history.
Yeah.
But if you make the lively one, then you're going to appeal to the guy who likes history, and you're going to appeal to the guy who wants to cut shit in their backyard, right?
Yeah, it's a win-win 50-50 on both ends. Absolutely.
Now,
it's kind of like Viking swords. I've always said, Viking swords aren't for everybody because they're heavy. They're built with a big forward balance because that's how Viking swords were used. Hold your shield, big slash, it's just Viking swords. It's how they are. And so, you're not going to get a Viking sword that handles like a Type 18. But then again, at the same time, you don't want it to, because historically, kind of like where my focus is, I want the Viking sword to handle like a Viking sword because that's what I want. If I wanted just a sword that looks like a Viking sword that cuts like a modern sword, it's kind of like nobody wants to shoot a musket. But if you're focused on the historical aspect of a musket, you don't want an AR-15 that's, dressed like a musket, or at the same time, when people say, oh, well, the Type 18, I love Type 18 swords. They cut so much better and they feel so much better. Well, duh, because there's like an 800-year gap between the two. That's like saying the musket, that's like some guy saying, your musket's really cool, bro, but man, I love my AR-15. It just, it slides and cocks and semi-automatic.
Sure.
It's great. And that's how sword history is. That's the evolution of it. What's that?
Those seem a little bit more obvious, though, right? To modern audiences, you see like a flintlock rifle and compare it with a modern weapon of war. Not that, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Then people understand like this is a thing from several hundred years before. The technology is different. nobody's like, yeah, I see that your Commodore 64 is really neato, but I like to play on my new modern computer.
Yeah,
It
my
plays games with
PlayStation
it.
or whatever.
Obviously, those are different things. But
Mhm.
with swords, they somehow to a lot of audiences and most people when they come into this hobby, that is less self-evident, right?
Mhm.
You don't know about the history and change and like a sword is
Yeah.
a sword, even to people
Mhm.
that are interested in them, until
It-
they
it-
kind of, I don't know,
Until
get
they
bit by the
handle it
bug.
or understand. Yeah.
Also, I
Oh,
don't think anyone wants to handle a Viking sword. That I've yet to find one that I like, and I know it's a me problem, but I don't. I don't
yeah,
think I've ever held a
and it
Viking
is,
sword that I like swinging around.
that's
I,
just like
I
it.
love the
Yeah.
look of them, but they're
Mhm.
just.
You like pickups, true? You got to. I'm sure you like pickup trucks.
I don't mind. Who
Yeah.
doesn't want to haul around a bed
Yeah.
full of drywall? That's
Exactly. Okay, but that doesn't mean you want one of them old Fords. You got to crank up. And same difference.
it's more a matter of ergonomics, right? Like
Yeah.
if you go to like the original pickup truck and like Viking swords seem like, what's that South Park thing where they have like the wheel, but you have to sit on it and there's a butt plug that goes up your ass and then you jerk the things off and then it drives and it's like really
Yeah.
efficient and great, but
Yeah.
you have to bear some discomfort. Viking swords are that for
Exactly.
me. They never ever feel good. They
They
always
don't.
feel like there's something
You know.
it always feels like I'm doing it wrong.
Well,
And
see,
so
and that's the thing. And I think that's what it is, because when it comes to medieval history, we don't really, even though we love to do our TV shows and all that, we don't really know a lot about, the Carolingian era, the Viking era, as we like to call it, in more layman's terms. And yeah, but at the same time, you got to think about it. A sword design that was used for at least 500 years, from the migration period up to the, the 10th century. If it was that bad, why they were forced to, it's like, this thing sucks. I mean, you would think they would think like us, like they put it in their hand and be like, this thing sucks. It's uncomfortable. But why? Well, obviously it had some purpose to them. The way they held it, maybe it was even just, the people of the time, they say people used to be shorter and smaller than us. Maybe they had smaller hands, so those compact grips felt comfortable. Maybe they preferred it because it was just, when you're swinging it around with a shield or whatever, you don't want it to lose it. So you like that compact grip that kind of squeezes your hand. It's kind of like us with like tight sneakers. It's like, there's some people that just love to tighten their sneakers really tight. And maybe it's a comfort thing. I don't know. Hard to say. But
I'm thinking there's some conspiracy to fuck with people in the future. Like either there
yeah,
was some glove that had the other half of the pommel like in it. Maybe it was like a buyer beware thing, like somebody else that would pick it up. They didn't have the
yeah,
rest of the pommel stitched in the glove. So they would
there
hold it
was
and be
some,
like, ow, this fucking sucks to swing around. Or maybe they were like, anytime you bury something, you fuck with the handle and put on this derpy thing so that nobody will want it. I don't know. That is all tinfoil hat nonsense. But
yeah, exactly.
it's more likely that I'm just doing something wrong. But I like every other sword, even the most awkward of them have some sense of intrinsic handling. But
Mm-hmm.
Viking swords always want to break my wrist when I swing them around, and so
you're a Japanese guy.
But
you're a Japanese guy. Now, how do you hold a Japanese sword? You
with
primarily in more of a kind of handshake grip. Your hand will lean towards that. Now, when you look at an arming sword with a wheel pommel or with a scent stopper pommel, same thing. You kind of, or you'll finger the guard, but either way, you have that grip.
Yeah.
Now, with a Viking sword, it's like straight hammer. You need that. If you try to deviate that, your palm's going to reach that lower guard. So you got to get used to just holding it like a hammer and just.
Yeah. But
it's boring.
For 500 years, somebody wasn't like, breaking the wrist might be nice. Like somebody like, so it's popular and they're smart people. They like went across oceans and conquered lands. I'd imagine somebody would have thought like, maybe it'd be great if this thing didn't fucking smash my wrist every time I hit somebody with it.
Well, exactly.
But apparently they, so that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, because you don't. There was a like the 13th Warrior. I always love that line. I wish I need to make a meme of it, but the grow stronger. You know, when he throws the sword off the boat to Antonio Banderas and he's, I cannot lift this. And then he's like, grow stronger. You know, it's like, just like, you quit being a wuss, you know, maybe that's what,
With
maybe
being so weak all the time.
Why do you like to handle? And they just kind of smack us on the back of the head and just call us wusses and walk away. I don't know, but
it's entirely possible. And
oh,
maybe
yeah.
rightly
Yeah,
so.
no, I just think that, but you know, one of the other things historically, I mean, swords, you know, at least in that Viking era, they weren't as prominent, you know, and still the sword was still and always has been kind of a secondary weapon anyway. I know us sword guys like to, you know, kind of glorify the sword, but really most swords did stay on a hip because someone was using a spear or using something else. So in that sense, you know, maybe that's why Vikings, you know, maybe, you know, with the Viking sword, it was like, well, not a whole lot of people are using them. So it didn't really matter. And if you were using it, it was with a specific purpose, with the shield, with that hammer grip. And that's just how you used it and deal with it. And then when someone got a bright idea that this does suck by 1000, when the Normans came around, they're like, this does suck. Let's change the pommels. Let's make them round so they're more comfortable and we can swing them easier on a horse or something. You know, yeah, you know, there's a lot of that in you know, the medieval history side of it that you can kind of research and kind of learn.
Do you think during that migration period there was like a generational change where people were like, back in my day, swords broke your wrist when you used them. This new generation is such a bunch of pussies. Like,
there could have been. I mean, there could have been. I mean, look at it like
round pommels. Ridiculous.
I know. I remember my pommels were big and round, you know, like the gladius, you know, it's like, you know, that was a pommel. This what's this flat thing? That thing's stupid. I want a big ball at the end of my sword, like a real sword, you know.
Yeah. Maybe. Don't know.
You know?
Yeah. I've often thought as well about like the weird archaeological finds that will happen in my backyard when somebody, like, I don't know, like a volcano blows up in Minnesota and 1,000 years from now, somebody's digging out and be like, yeah, apparently there was this giant battle fought. And
I know, right?
All these broken swords.
Well, it's like I don't know if you know, you sound like you like comedy. I don't know if you listen to much Richard Pryor, but Richard Pryor on an album, he was talking about 70s men, pimps, with their moon boots and their big hats and all that. And he said, you know, 3,000 years ago, someone's going to unbury a pimp and think he's a man from space. You know, look, he's wearing moon boots. You know, that's kind of the punchline of the joke. You know, it's a man from space. You know, I mean, and that's the thing. It's like, you know, it's like, God, people in the 2000s were weird. They collected a lot of crap. And
yeah. Apparently there's a giant battle because there's broken swords laid all over the place.
Broken swords.
Samurai came back and fought medieval knights to answer the question, which sword is better.
You know what's going to be sad is, especially if it's like, you know, post-apocalyptic and stuff like that, is they're going to see all the water bottles we wasted and cutted, and then we're really going to be bastards. These you know, these sons of bitches played with water. You know, we played with water. We filled up bottles and cut them for fun. And, you know, and we're out here like, you know, like what was I, you know, like a road warrior, you know, desperately like squeezing, you know, a plant just to get a drop of liquid so we survived. But yeah, I mean, that's just kind of, it's funny when you do think about it, like what are people going to think about us? But, you know.
But we know what they're going to think. They're going to be like, they were backwards and stupid, because that's what everyone thinks of the people that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Their medicine. What were they doing? Why were they cutting out things? You know, surgery. What? God, surgery's so outdated. Who would have thought of that? You know? Yeah.
Obviously, they didn't know ground was the fastest way to fly. Like that.
Yeah, exactly.
That's anyway. I suppose let's reel it back in, because we have strayed somewhat from our original topic. Yeah. Is the review samples? Samples. Going back. What would you like to see other reviewers out there doing? People that are making videos, how could they better represent the product?
Well, I don't think they're really doing anything wrong. I think you know, I think really all that really boils down to is that if you're going to get a sword, focus on it. And this is, I guess, where it gets tough, because we're not getting paid. So it's almost like the reward is the sword. As they say, if you do something good, don't do it for free. So I guess if someone's going to send me a sword and they're going to be like, well, here's your compensation is a sword. Well, how is that compensation if you want me to go beat it up? You better bring me two. Bring me one to beat up and one to hang on my wall to say, thank you, David, for doing a review for me. Now I feel paid. If I'm not, then, you're not paying me to beat up your sword. Is the payment in the YouTube views? Possibly. But then again, if we're not getting the view counts to value our time and effort, it's kind of like cutting tatami. I never cut tatami because tatami's expensive. If I had the free budget, if I had the extra budget to cut it, it's like I got a video coming out where I do a little family cutting, I guess. My daughter and my brother, I was doing some cutting from my most recent videos, and they're like, hey, we want to cut too. And I was like, all right, we'll get over here. So I did like I got a video coming out that's all them kind of cutting with me. And my brother, once he gets into something, he's into it. Now he loves cutting. He always thought swords were stupid. Now all of a sudden, swords are cool. Because he's always been a gun guy. It's weird in our family. He's been the gun guy, I've been the sword guy. So we've always had an opposite. But anyway, he wanted to do ballistic gel. And he's like wanting to get these like zombie heads. I'm like, Ryan, those are like $160 and you get to cut them 2 or 3 times. And that's if you cut them good. I mean, you could have a bad cut, ruin the thing, and it's over. Well, I just wasted $160 to not even get a good shot of cutting something. That's why we cut water bottles and wet paper and all pool noodles and all that stuff. It's cheap. So if you're going to make me do something, then yeah, I mean, there should be compensation. And if that compensation is the sword, then yeah, I'm going to baby that thing. I'm not going to beat the crap out of it because I don't want to lose what I'm getting for compensation, I guess. If you don't look at it as compensation, kind of like I said with you earlier with the Ronins, when you were really beating the crap out of the Ronin stuff, when you first started your channel, it didn't matter. It's like, well, they're giving me the sword. I don't care. I just want to beat it up. I'm having fun beating the crap out of swords. That's my goal. Then it's different, and I think that might be kind of the problem where a lot of these guys, if the Chinese market want to use us as advertisers, well, maybe they should pay us as advertisers. And I think that'll benefit us all as sword reviewers. I also think we'll get less free swords because they're basically getting it for free. And that's kind of, like I said, what frustrated me with the whole Ryujin Swordier video was that I basically gave them free advice. And I gave them free advice because I was asked to as a favor to Paul. But at the same time, I thought that it was going to continue and it was going to be like, okay, well, maybe David will design some swords for us. Well, I would love to design some swords. I'd love to pick out some historical examples that I've studied myself and went to the museum and saw and got data on, just like Peter or whoever, and make that sword and make it authentic and make it real. And then it was like, we'd rather just churn out whatever and pitch it out and sell it because it's cheaper that way. I think that if there was more compensation involved, it might be better. If not, then yeah, it's just free swords at that point. And people are going to treat it as free swords because, ooh, I got a sword and I didn't have to pay $300 for it. And as long as I get on and review it, then I don't have to, then I don't feel inauthentic. And, it's like, Paul with the Ryujins, I got the border steel last year and there was 3 other swords and two of them didn't even actually do reviews. And I think you got one of the Japanese ones, didn't you? From that batch, because there was Japanese ones, there was like 3 or 4 Japanese ones, and there was like 3 or 4 European ones. And like 2 of the European ones didn't even do reviews. They got the sword and then they disappeared off Sword Buyer's Guide forum. And it was like, okay, hey, are those, or the Ritter Steel one was one of them that was actually pretty cool. And I was actually thinking of getting, but the girlfriend I mentioned that likes swords like that that border steel one better. She said, that one looks cooler, get that one. And I was like, all right, I'll pick that one. But anyway, yeah, it was like anyway, yeah, so they didn't even get reviewed. So basically they did get a free sword. And then I can see like, okay, well, why, I don't know. I'm rambling again, but yeah, I know.
I've had some experiences like that myself. I've had not all, but
yeah.
Initially when I started, I felt kind of weird about having anything of value, right? My objective was to contribute to the conversation in a meaningful way. I had written reviews before, and I moved to doing video because, there's two things. One, Paul, it's his sandbox. And that's perfectly fine. And YouTube has their own rules and their own sandbox. But it seemed like, hey, there were some, somebody offended or did something against Paul or what was going on. And now there was no mention of them on the forum. And I was like, well, that's not, I understand why he's doing it. And I don't begrudge him. It's his sandbox. If I said, you shall not mention Voldemort in this house, and you came to my house for dinner and were like, hey, I know what we should talk about. I'd be like, get the fuck out. I don't,
exactly.
none of that here.
Yeah.
And that's fine. That's his house. But it is limiting because there was a brand at the time that was a hot topic, and it was forbidden from the.
I was right there with you. I was right there in the mix of it.
Like that's fine, but then that means that one, I feel like the reach of forums and reviews is limited, and video is probably it's more accessible and also more permanent. And then when I write it,
and in that argument with he who will not be named, who we're talking about, he was one of the first to do videos and promote his brand with videos, and because I remember seeing his videos, and I liked the guy. I didn't have a problem with him. My thing with him is that he was very vulgarly aggressive. I guess that was the only where I couldn't take his side, because I get it. This is two brands competing, and one has the favor of Sword Buyer's Guide and the other doesn't, or it has the backing of the members, but it doesn't have the backing of the actual administration or the moderators, which we know there was a certain moderator that did have a strong bias towards that other brand. And he got dropped. But at the same time, I think that if he would have went about it a better way, better wording, and not just F you, F you, F you, F this, F that, F your mother, I think it would have went a lot of ways. A little more honey would have eased it, because he did have proof. His product was better. He just couldn't properly sell it. He needed a rep. And maybe that's something too with a lot of these, with these new Chinese manufacturers or vendors that are coming out. Maybe they do need a couple sword guys to be their reps. I don't see anything with that either. If you're going to be, for example, let's say Dynamo Sword Channel is going to be the Swordier rep or whatever. Well, then be out front and say that. Hey, I'm David, and I'm a rep for Swordier. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm going to just one-up every sword and say every other sword sucks. But at the same time, I'm going to definitely, obviously, promote heavily Swordier because I'm affiliated with them. I'm their partner. Same thing with Azure Forge. They got a lot of flack for that Kingmaker rep knockoff. And they've been on Sword Buyer's Guide basically asking people, hey, can we, will somebody help us figure out what swords we can make that aren't copycats? And at first I was like, well, this sounds like kind of a Swordier thing again, where you take the information, then you just run away and we never see you again. So I shot him a PM and I was like, well, hey, if you're serious about it, I'll help you design swords. I love that side of swords. And, I'm just waiting for a reply back. But in the meantime, I see they got 2 new swords out that they've passed out to everybody that wants to review them, I guess. You got one too? Yeah. Like the Kawwood sword. Did you get the Kawwood or did you get the or the Slosh Urbach?
Both.
You got both? Okay, cool. All right. So yeah. And I mean, there's no problem with that. You know, where's mine? You know, nobody sent me one. Yeah, I don't know. I'm just teasing. But you know what I mean? It's kind of like, yeah, that's cool. Whatever, you know, review it, you know, get it out there. Are they good swords? Absolutely. Can we play the whole argument? And I hate that. And I know I got into it and I kind of regret it in the long run because it is kind of stupid, the plagiarizing thing. I mean, does it matter? Yes, but it doesn't matter because it really doesn't. And it matters to those that it matters to. And I don't have any stake in Albion or anything. I just like what got me, and I hope I explained that in this video. What bothered me is that I tried to show a lot of these Chinese vendors, hey, there's a right way to do this, and we could do it, and we could succeed if you take the advice. And they were like, nah, we're good. That's what kind of insulted me. That's why I've been getting, you know, Alex and a few of them a hard time, because it's like, I know what you're doing. I've seen behind your curtain, and it's not, you know, you're still going to sell swords. And yeah, I'm just some idiot blabbing on the internet. Nobody cares what I think. They're going to buy your swords whether they what I say or not. And I'm not trying to limit their sales. If I was, I wouldn't have Sword Ear on Sword News. I've had Sword Ear on Sword News more than I've probably had anybody, because they have new swords. And hey, people like to buy swords. That's the whole goal is, hey, we like swords. Let's talk about swords. In that sense,
that's one of the things that I kind of rubbed me wrong about the SPG situation many years ago is, if somebody's still making swords, I personally don't think you're, at least if the goal is to have a conversation about swords, if you omit people that are selling them, then all it does is leave open questions, right? And if you're just transparent, like, hey, Alex, he makes really good swords, and they iterate a lot, and they're coming out with their own stuff, but they've also kind of apologetically or unapologetically copied people.
Absolutely.
And felt kind of okay about it. If that bothers you, then there you go. Make a decision.
That's
the guy from Cold Steel likes to do stuff in his free time that involves like trophy hunting. I say that because he's very public about it, right? He's got an ego about his martial arts skill. You know, like if you have an opinion about that, there you go. I'm not saying anything that isn't public knowledge. I'm not like, hey, do you know what happened last time at the private Cold Steel, you know, at Lynn Thompson's family get together during his Christmas party with his family? Like, no, that's not it. It's just public information. And I think that gives people agency about spending their dollar where they care. But if you're not allowed to talk about it, I think that's almost more harmful. And so,
it is. Yeah, absolutely. Especially on something that's supposed to be public. And that's where it rubbed me wrong too. There was a lot of years where I dumped Sword Buyer's Guide too. I mean, basically after all that, and it wasn't that I had, you know, Ricky's side or anything. I didn't really have anybody's side because I didn't really care. I just hated the chaos. I left for a good 3 years just because I was like, you know what, screw this place. This isn't even fun anymore. It's just everybody hating on everybody and everybody just talking smack, and it was dumb. And I'm not that type of person. I mean, yeah, I can get a little hot when, you know, I mean, you know, call the kettle black, you know, at least be honest. You know, I could care less. If you copied the Abalon, great, copy the Abalon. At least say it. Don't be disingenuous with it. Be like, yeah, I copied it because it's a great sword and it sells, and I want to prove that I can make a sword just like that for cheaper. But then again, also be honest with yourself. Could you do it without the Abalon to copy from? And the answer is no. So you got to be honest with yourself in that sense. If you want to have, at least me, in the integrity sense, either way, it's money. You're selling swords. So
there's a little bit of a spoiler there too, as I have 3 now samples from Azure Forge. There's the example from the Kingmaker, the one that's very similar to the Schloss Erbach, but different enough where I wouldn't say it's the same. I have a Schloss Erbach, and it's not. It's a to me a different sword, but I haven't played with
the windlass, or is it the arms and armor?
The arms and armor. Arms and armor Schloss. And then there's another one that has a scent stopper faceted pommel and an up cross guard, and both the Schloss and the second one are, I would guess that they're from a different manufacturer altogether. Like they're not the refinement that was on the Kingmaker copy versus the other two is very apparent that like, hey, this design really, really works well. That is what made it special.
Yeah.
when you try to copy and do something yourself, like that special something
Goes away.
is quite a bit lost. The Schloss is better than whatever the other one is. I can't remember the names, but the other one is very like, I haven't spent enough time with them, but my early impressions are rather negative of the arming-ish sword. But the Schloss one is actually is all right, but it's not. It's more in line with like, oh, this is a Longchuan attempt at the Schloss. The Kingmaker was like, this is a a good from afar, but far from good, but well, not quite. It was a pretty awesome sword for the money when they were selling it, but it is very much because of the design. Anyway, I have to play with more of them. That will be something that I do maybe this weekend, but there's an early spoiler for you. I did want to, again, steer us back to the topic at hand. So you mentioned compensation for reviews. And do you, would that pollute things? Like if reviewers were paid for reviews, would that put in more? To me, that seems more bias. Like, hey,
if you're getting
Azure Forge gave me this sword, but not only that, they gave me $5,000 to cover my time, and I'm being compensated, and now I'm going to review the product. And people do that, and I'm not saying it has to make them biased, but I think in this, like, honestly, like if you're not kind of doing it for love of the game, like I don't know. What do you think? Oh, did I lose you? Did you freeze?
I think it can be kind of a catch-22. Did I freeze? Am I acting up or are you acting? You were freezing on me. Am I freezing?
It could be both. It doesn't have to be. It can be two things.
Can you hear me now? Two things. Can you hear me now? I feel like a Verizon commercial.
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
But yeah, we're old. God damn it, we're old. But no, I think it's a catch-22 because if you're getting paid for something, obviously you're going to do the job better. We all know that. If I'm getting paid $5 an hour to clean a room, okay, and I'm supposed to be there for 5 hours cleaning that room, I'm getting $1 an hour. I ain't going to give a crap about that job. If I'm doing it for free just because, I like whoever or whatever, then that's different. But if I'm getting value to it, like let's say someone gives me, hey, $60, you clean this room for 5 hours, you get it cleaned up, I'll give you $60. Okay, well, that's a little better. That's a little over $10 an hour. Okay, I'll do that. I think that the job's going to be done better because the value's in it, because you're getting paid. Do I think people are going to kiss ass just because they're paid? No. Is that a possibility? Yes. But at the same time, when it's just a gift to an extent, free sword, penny for your thoughts, free sword, I think you get that same potential of bias anyway. I think that the thing is again, when we look at the high-end stuff, like Albion doesn't give out review samples. You ever asked Albion for a review sample, Matt?
Yeah.
Have you?
Yeah.
What did they tell you?
No.
Yeah, exactly. We don't need you, or we don't. Yeah, the proof's in the pudding. Our swords are sell good enough without your stinking review.
I can understand Albion though, because it would almost the same thing with Huawei, right? So there's a company that I've asked for a review sample, and they've said no.
Yeah,
but I understand both cases for the same reason. Now Huawei will sell a $300 katana, and that is well within my ballpark of things that I review, right? Albion makes fancy European swords, and I review them less frequently, but I still have hundreds of videos about European swords. But both of them have like a 2-year backlog to get through. I guess I don't know about Huawei, but they seem to be struggling to keep up with orders, and Albion is also, got plenty of work to do.
Sword.
So if they advertise,
they got a sword to pass out.
What benefit does it really have them? Why give away a product you could sell when you can't keep up with your orders already?
Yeah.
And now I guess they could expand and get bigger and data, but like I think they're playing the long game of like the sword interest has ebb and flow, and we're gonna stay with the size of company that we have so that we we are consistent and people will wait or they won't, but like
Yeah.
we're safe. And then they're not
Mhm.
bringing on a bunch of people and laying them off and bringing on people and laying them off. They're staying pretty consistent and,
Yeah.
keeping, positive vibes and
Mhm.
good, competent people for long-term periods.
Well, yeah. And when I look at it that way, yeah, that makes sense because they don't need to. I mean, that's the
Yeah.
end of
It's
it. They
not
don't
like
need
we don't need your stinking reviews. They've always been very polite, and
Yeah.
anytime I've seen Mike in person, he's very generous with his
Yeah.
time. But I like honestly, like, hey, you could have if you sent me a sword, there might be 10 open orders for that sword right now that you could have filled. Why would it go to
Yeah.
me? Like,
yeah, and that makes sense. But also it's one of the things that we see as, reviewers. Name me one person that's done a destructive review on a high-end sword.
well, I guess it depends on what you consider high end.
Well, I'm talking about a sword that at least costs $1,000 or more.
Shad did one on the tight ski. He broke that. That was $3,000.
Mm-hmm.
Inadvertently, Skull has broken, or chipped Albion.
On accidents.
And I have broken or chipped or damaged swords that are, above $1,000.
Yeah, but it wasn't intentional. It wasn't like you went out there to. I mean, did you really go out there and hit
I'm trying to think of the value of stuff. It's tough. I broke a Ronin katana that was under $1,000, close. I think they're like $900.
Yeah, they're different. They're
elite one.
Elites, yeah, elite.
And then I damaged my Oni katana, and I've screwed up. Like I tested the tight ski one. I didn't push it to failure, but I screwed up the edge a little bit doing some of the nonsense. But yeah, no, in terms of destructive tests, very few people, and and even the ones that do on very few swords, because the samples for swords that are that much money are very few and far between.
Yeah.
And I am not in a pay bracket where I can take a $5,000 sword and break it for shits and giggles.
Exactly.
If somebody sent me one and said, break this sword, I would do that. And I know that there's also been times where people get $5,000 swords and the people send them to them and say, yeah, break it. And then they don't, and they keep it instead.
Yeah, because it becomes the precious, it's like, oh no, I can't, this, it's, oh no, this is so pretty. This is so nice. And
Azure Forge hurt us.
Oh, hi. Yeah. We've been talking a lot about them this episode. So yeah, well, you're welcome, guys. Yeah, cool. Yeah, and you guys, and like I said, I'm all down for, if they want to send me review samples too, I'll do it. It's not like I have a bias against that. I just the thing is that, back to our main topic is that, it's just the authenticity. And if we're authentic with our reviews, I think we're better off for the viewer, but also better off for the company too, because, the average buyer is not going to see the details that we might worry about. It's like the uppy, historic, and I'd take off my monocle and be like, this sword wouldn't be used in the 15th century. It is from the 12th century. I could be all snobby like that, but who cares?
Be a good character.
Yeah.
Get a monocle.
I should. I know. I've been contemplating.
Ego.
I was going to have a little fun with the channel in the beginning, but then I don't know. My acting would probably be horrible, but like
that would make it better.
John C. Reilly has a character called Dr. Stephen Brule. I don't know if you ever seen that. It was on
I think you should have Mr. Monopoly Man make my farts don't smell sword connoisseur guy,
and just be just be a complete like a what's his the old wrestler, the Graduate or whatever, or whatever he was called. But anyway, but yeah, it just there's the authenticity is where it matters. I think that's where people will enjoy it more, and they'll see, do I want to buy it or not? I mean, that's what it breaks down to. I mean, is this sword worth buying? And that's why I said I can kind of be biased with my reviews, because if I reviewed it, I bought it, so I obviously like it, and it was worth it to me. But then again, there is some stuff that I've gotten there where I've like, yeah, this isn't as good as I thought it would be, and I've had a little negative to say to it. But I think people appreciate that too. It's like, but then I've had stuff that I don't like, and I know you have too, and other people love it. I mean, I think it's just getting the visual look of what it is, and people enjoying that, and it doesn't matter what it is. That's why I said, like, with, I did I used to do a little segment called Discussion Topics, and I just talked about stuff, and I talked about display swords and wall hangers, and it's always been a bad word in the sword community, wall hanger. You don't want to own a wall hanger. You got to own a real sword. But some people, a wall hanger's not bad. I mean, think about it. It's cheap. It's cheaper, so it's not a low investment. As long as you're smart and you ain't going to swing it around and try to cut with it, you're fine. It's going to hang on the wall. It's going to look pretty. It's made of stainless steel, so rather than needing oil and polish paste or whatever, a couple Windex sprays and a wipe down next time you're house cleaning on a Sunday, and your sword's clean. If that's all you're going to do is hanging on the wall. That's why they're called wall hangers. Get a wall hanger, hanging on the wall. It looks pretty. It insinuates your Lord of the Rings collection, whatever, you love the movies or whatever. Like with the Conan, it's like, do you need a $3,000 Albion that was, from the original molds and Jody Sampson had a hand in? Well, absolutely. Because if you're that authentic to it and you want the real thing, the closest possible, getting the windlass, well, I ain't got $3,000, I got 300. All right, we'll go for the windlass. Same thing, getting that actual molds. If you want something to just hang on the wall and you love the Conan movies, get the knockoff on Amazon for $60. It looks enough. If you really you want the exact wax mold look or whatever, yeah, go with the licensed ones. But if not, big deal. You're getting what you want, which is a Conan sword. What's your purpose of it? And it's like, well, I just want to sit it on my lap when I watch Conan movies. Well,
the purpose side of things, I think, is an important one, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I do think that is something that sword collectors and people are very guilty of. Is we often think that the reason somebody would buy a sword, there's only one reason, and there's not. There's a lot of people, different strokes for different folks, and that is true even among swords.
Mm-hmm.
The wall hanger stuff is just a little less obvious, because there are nobody buys a replica firearm that doesn't fire and is unaware of it.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Nobody buys a gun that doesn't shoot and is like, oh, really? It won't do things? But people buy swords that are rat-tailed tangs and might turn into a helicopter of death and hurt them, thinking that I could go, all I need to do is put an edge on it and I can go and chop down a tree.
Mm-hmm.
And those, but people don't buy replica cars and think like, oh, they don't drive. It's just for parking in my driveway to make people think I have people don't do that.
Yeah. I got a good one for that.
Every other thing that you buy that's fake is more obvious. People buy fake flowers and fake fucking fruit to put in a bowl so it looks fresh.
Right?
But they know that I can't eat it, unless they're really drunk and maybe they forget. But for the most part, people don't buy fake flowers and then get mad that they don't smell.
Yeah.
People buy fake swords quite a bit and are like, what do you mean I can't actually sword with it? It's like, well, yeah. And
you
so
ask for it.
You buy it as wall art, perfectly fine. I have absolutely no objection to an adult human being making a decision to do what they want with their money. If they're buying it and they know what it is, everything's good.
Yeah.
But it does seem like there's a little bit of a gap, with the knowledge, because I think a lot of people, myself included, when I bought when I started collecting, right, the first sword I got, I thought I could do sword shit with, and I could not, and I fucked it up real good.
My first sword was actually a real sword, but it wasn't actually a sword. It was a sword to me because I was like 7-8 years old. My uncle had a Arkansas toothpick, and it was like a little sting. It's like a little short sword. I don't know if you've ever seen an Arkansas toothpick, but there, it's like a little dagger, medieval looking dagger, and I would carry that around. I'd have a little belt, and and I was He-Man, with my real sword, running around his yard, because he had a big yard, and then I remember my first sword that I ever got was actually it's DePico or windlass, I don't know, but it's an Indian made cavalry saber, I got that when I was 16. My grandparents got it in the South. They were visiting family. They're from my mother's side's from like Missouri, and they always known I like swords. They brought me this sword. My grandpa made this plaque. Happy birthday, David, 16th birthday. And I got this sword. Still got the plaque, still got the sword. My next sword was your typical flea market katana, plastic, red, looked like a crappy ninja sword. And I had that for a while till it fell apart. And then, and I remember I was one of those idiots. That's what's so funny. I was one of those idiots in like 2008 when, Paul was starting Sword Buyer's Guide, and I'd argue, no, my stainless steel is just as good as that sword, blah, blah, blah. It's fine because I swung it and it didn't fall apart on me. You're full of shit, And then I started seeing like, oh, well, I'm full of shit. I don't know what a sword is. And here I am thinking I do, because I always knew it on the Japanese side. I didn't really focus on it on the European side because it's weird. And this is something that I was going to bring up earlier when you were talking about it, is sword knowledge. People are so confused about swords. I've done a lot of like public displays and stuff, especially like in my small town here. I've done like little demo and expos at my library, and I've done them at my job. I work at an RCCI with young boys, and I'll bring in swords and do like little displays and stuff and little historical explanations. And I've done them at Ren fairs and stuff and locally. And the big thing is, the one thing that everybody says when they grab a sword, one of my swords, it's light. Why is it so light? And it's like, well, because it's a sword. It's a tool. It's meant to be used. Men didn't use swords for 100 years, kind of like our Viking argument earlier, and say, I hate this damn thing. It's uncomfortable and it sucks. They'd throw it away, just like us. If we had something, well, this thing sucks. We got a can opener and it doesn't open the cans. Boom, trash can, And I'm as dumb now as it was in 2008.
Takes a real man to know his limitations. Well, good on you, David.
Yeah.
I resemble that comment.
Oh, my God. I know. But that's what I mean. That's the first thing they say. Well, it's light. And it's, wow, this is because they have that perception, and a lot of it is film. And that's where I think like where a lot of it is to where you don't get the history as much in film, because that's where a lot of swords are. It's like, one of them I've been watching and having fun with, I haven't seen for years, but they got it on Amazon Prime for free. It's the Robin Hood, the BBC Robin Hood. Have you ever seen that? It's like from the 80s. Real just 80s cheese, but it's good. It's I watched it when I was a kid. I remember it used to be on like the public television when I was a kid, and I saw it. I just watched a few episodes having lunch the other day, and just having a little nostalgia fun. But they use those Errol Flynn style thin blade, El Cid looking swords on that production. They're not like like Ridley Scott's Robin Hood, where they're using a Type 12, that looks historically accurate. And I think that's where a lot of misconceptions are with swords with people is that they just look at the generic. That's why a Viking sword and a 15th century, they can be used together, because not only because of medieval fantasy, where you'll see that, that, oh, well, you got a barbarian sword, we'll make it look like a Viking sword. And then the barbarians use Viking looking swords. And then you have the magical knights, and they use, the fancy long swords like, Anduril and stuff, And I think that's just kind of that general, that nuanced perception of swords that the common person has. But I think it also goes back to like what we were talking earlier, where people, they like swords. So once you get a sword in your hand, you want to swing it. It's almost inherent, like it's that DNA, once we put a sword in our hand, we want to swing it. Oh, now we're a knight. Now we're a samurai. Now we're a ninja. We can't not swing it, And I think that's something that where, yeah, the wall hanger is good enough until it's not. And then I want to get it down and I want to swing it. And maybe that turns into like a full form, like martial practice, like with Hema or Kendo or Kenjutsu, or maybe it goes into like a history thing, like kind of like the avenue I took, because I went from martial arts and then got old and decided, what, I'm tired of swinging swords. I'd rather read about them and I'd rather study them and all that. It's just different. You talked to me 20 years ago, I was out in the backyard swinging swords for 5 hours. Now I'm lucky if I get out, on a Saturday, and feel like it after, 40 hours. So, that's just how it is with people. I think swords always have that appeal, that aura. I think it's always been in all cultures, swords have been a very culturally, mystical, magical, persona of just, of cool. Swords are just cool. I think that's why even when we say, oh, well, swords are kind of niche or swords are kind of in a small community, it don't matter. You can show a sword to somebody, and if they don't instantly freak out because, oh, you're crazy, you got a sharp blade pointing at me, they're like, that's cool. Can I hold it? Can I see it? Oh, wow, that is so cool. And I get that a lot at when I do my expos and stuff. I'd be surprised how many people. My first one, I was like, oh God, everyone's just going to look at me funny because it's my local community and they know me. They know me as David, went to school with me, grew up with me. And then, same with people that watch my channel. I didn't know you had a YouTube channel. Oh, yeah, well, thanks, But yeah, they go and all of a sudden then it's like, oh, wow, that's cool. You taught me something. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I like swords now. And I think that's
when you do those, do people just come up and grab the sword without talking?
No, I've never had anyone really just grab a sword. People
in Idaho are smarter than. That's well done. I do every now and again. There's events that I'll go to, usually with part of the dojo, and there's like a Japanese festival, and there's a table out, and there's swords, and there's been times where people just grab the sword. And usually, like I've had times where people grab it and then they're playing with it. And like, is it okay if I hold it? Like while they're holding it. And my usual explanation is touching a sword is like touching a man's penis. You should ask first. It's not a no, but it is a definitely ask first.
It's an ask first. Yeah, exactly. I think that's with a lot of things, and it's just personal boundaries anyway. I mean, you'll always have those kind of bullheaded types that just kind of, just brr. But at the same time, I think that, a lot of people, they do respect that boundaries. I think they also respect it as a weapon. I think the more you get in, like, for example, and I know I'm not trying to, kind of set up like a stereotype or anything, but I think you would see more of that, like, for example, at like a Comic-Con than you would at like a Ren Fair. At a Ren Fair, at least they kind of understand medieval history and what a sword is. For like, remember, you might have like some hype, and like I said, I'm just going to sound horrible, like some hyperactive ADHD kid that's like, oh, cool, sword, woo, yeah, that's, and then it's like, whoa, slow down, don't grab it. Or you have those guys that just, I have that attitude, and it's easy, and maybe you do too, but if you ever like at a Ren Fair and you go into the sword booth, and we've handled more swords than that guy's probably selling, but then he's like, please don't touch my swords or all that, or you need to, and that's like, hey, bud, you almost want to have that attitude, like, hey, bud, I've held more swords than you've sold, but that's still being a jerk. I don't do that, but at the same time, it's almost like when they act like
I get what you're throwing down.
And that's what you do.
It doesn't happen often lately. I haven't been to the Ren Fair in a few years, but most of the booths will recognize me now because Arms and Armor is at my Ren Fair, and I've met a few of the folks there. So most of and they're not, other than like keep where you point things is pretty easy. The Angel Sword booth I've also bought and stuff from them before, so it's I don't get grief there so much either. There was one though, and it's a booth that would sell Starfire and Baltimore Knife and Sword and a few other brands, and there was a sword from Ilya there that had a beautiful set of engravings, and it looked similar to like the Heretic that he made a long time ago, but it wasn't that one, I think. Anyway, it was like marked as $5,000, and I asked to see it. And they like just looked at me. And granted, when I go out in public, I look homeless.
Yeah.
But they just looked and said no. I was like, and it was marked like $5,000, and I was like, I can afford it. It looks good. I would,
Yeah.
like, okay.
Well, that's kind of
And
like
they just said no and didn't get up from the chair, and I was like,
yeah, it's like
okay.
it's like, you know, the millionaire comes in, like I said, looking like a bum, and wants to test drive the Ferrari or the, you know, the Buick or whatever. It's like, oh no, sir, you can't afford this car. Please don't touch the car. And it's like, well, I got $1 million in my pocket. I was about to buy this thing, but your attitude just.
Well, they said no, so I'm not there to.
Yeah, we're gonna respect
make a
it, but
scene.
at the
Like,
same
okay,
time,
that's
you don't have
fine.
to be like, well, I'm Matthew Jensen from the Sword Channel. Look at that. See that? You know?
Don't you know who I am?
Exactly. Yes. You know, it's, you know, and that's the thing, because we don't. I mean, Idaho's small. You know, I'm in Idaho, and we have our one Ren fair, and there's like 3 booths that sell swords. There's kind of like that one that they. I don't know if they. What brand they were. They weren't Baltimore, but they were basically SCA swords, you know, the blunt ones, you know, and they were sold next to the arena where they do the SCA fighting and the jousting. And then there's this other guy that's out of Pocatello, Idaho, Black Dragon Smithy or Black Dragon something sword shop, and he's got like a local sword shop, which is cool, but then he goes to these Ren fairs, and he's a real cool guy, and he's like got everything. He's like Idaho's little cult of Athena. He's got a little bit of everything in his thing. And then there's this other guy that it's weird because they actually sell dice. They got all these D&D dice, you know, big old booth at D&D dice. But then over in the corner, they have some swords. And they kind of rubbed me wrong because they had a sword I kind of wanted to buy, just because, as you know, I have a weird tick of buying old windlasses. I don't know why, but I just do. When I see an old windlass, I buy it. It doesn't matter if they're worth it. I just always like the old windlasses. Maybe it's a nostalgia thing, like
it must be
days.
It can't be good taste. I'm sorry.
I know, right? But I just love the old windlass swords. They're just fun. I guess it's kind of you know what it is. It's PTSD from my ex-wife when she wouldn't let me buy swords. You know, in the 2000s when I was younger and I was wanting to buy swords, and all you guys were buying swords all the time, and you know, in the new acquisition thread, look at my new sword, and it's like, oh, I get 1 sword a year because that's what my wife allows. And I would see all these old swords, and I'd be like, you know, I wish I could have that one. And even though that sword sucked, I was like on that strict budget of this is what she would allow. So then it was like, yeah, but maybe that's it. I don't know. I mean, I just kind of like the old. I like the old. I like having them. Like, hey, remember this sword? This was back in the day. You know, this sword was so cool in 2000, and now it sucks. You know,
that is fair. I mean, there are things that, like, I remember when I was not in a good place, you know, financially, and things I wanted, and now that I can afford them. You know, I've gone back and bought dumb things that I just couldn't afford back in the day, and I did it for no other reason than like I wanted it then, and God damn it, I'll get it now. You know,
that's how I was. Yeah, that's kind of how I was when we
to
first
a point though. Like there were some toys I always wanted. There was a GI Joe I was after, and it was Storm Shadow, the ninja guy, right?
Yeah, I know Storm Shadow. Yeah,
I could never find it because
You talking about the little guys, or are you talking about like,
the little one,
little white? Yeah.
So I always wanted that GI Joe, but it had gone out of production when I got into the GI Joes.
Yeah.
And then when I was like, and eBay didn't exist, and they, you know, I would look at thrift stores and things like that when I could, but I never found that one. And so when I got to a point where I was a grown ass man, I was like, you know, I was one of that fucking thing. And so I went on eBay and I paid way too much money for one.
Yeah.
But there's a level that you will and will not do, right? Because there were other GI Joe things that I wanted, and some of them are like $20,000.
Oh, it's a rabbit hole. Yeah.
Nope.
Do you collect figures? Or are you kind of a collector?
No. There was one that I wanted, and that was the only one. I still have some of my old toys. I'm a pack rat, but other than swords,
that's what I am.
I can't say that I really have any. I have other piles of things that you might consider collections, but nothing that really comes close.
Most of mine are just, well, you sound like you were probably a lot like me. You took care of your stuff when you were a kid. You weren't
Yes.
one of those.
So that
You weren't melting
my
your
children
G.I.
can
Joes.
destroy it when I'm older.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
basically why.
you played with it, and then you put it in a box, and then, you know, next you know it, you're like in your 30s and you're digging into your mom and dad's place, and there's your box of old GI Joes that you always took care of. And hey, now I got GI Joes, and you know, I was the same way with He-Man. I was a big He-Man guy. Like I said, He-Man got me into swords. You know, I was like, you know, if it had a sword on it, I was He-Man. You know, He-Man was cool, and so anyway, I went. I got all the same thing. I got all my old He-Man guys, and I got a similar thing. But do you remember Castle Grayskull, He-Man's castle? Okay, now back when I was a kid, my dad was stacking wood, and I lost Castle Grayskull to a wood pile because it's about a quart of wood, and it fell down and just destroyed it. Well, I always had all my old He-Man figures in a Tupperware, still do. My girls played with them; they had fun with them. Now they're just, I guess, a college fund if I sell them for them. But I went and I found a Castle Grayskull online. I was like, all right, I might as well have it to go with them just because I had some extra, my same thing. And then, so I got that, but it didn't have the jawbridge. And so then sure enough, I go on eBay and I overpay for a jawbridge just because I couldn't stand looking at the thing without a jawbridge. But, you know, but yeah, I get it. We just, you know, I think it's just, if we're having fun, I mean, we can't take it with us. We might as well have fun with it. That's why I've always been with money. I mean, yeah, you don't want to blow it all and be broke, but at the same time, if you got it, have fun. I mean, that's 90% of this rack behind me has been bought in the last 5-6 years simply because I've had the financial ability.
There was a question from Kingfisher who said, how much do you spend on swords a year?
Oh, is that a me question or a you question or a both of us question?
We how about you first?
Okay, me first. You have way cooler shit than me, so you obviously probably have a bigger budget than me. But I would say on average, 1,000 to maybe on high, like a crazy year, maybe $1,500. On average, 800 to 1,000. You know, but that's pretty much because I buy budget. You know, I've always been the budget guy. I know a lot of people are saying like, oh, well, you could get one good Albion or one good A&A for $1,000. Me, I'd rather have 5 windlasses for $1,000, $200 each, 5 of them, or whatever. I'm doing the math wrong probably, but anyway, I would rather have that and have 5 swords to study and play with than 1. And that's just kind of how I've always been. And I prefer the budget stuff because I know a lot of people, that's what they can afford. And it's not like, oh, I would never review anything high end. But at the same time, it's like, you know, I like to stay in that budget wheelhouse. If you know, I know, you know, someone's only going to spend $300 on a sword, I'm going to tell them why they should buy that $300 sword and why it's worth it. Not why they shouldn't and they should save up for the $1,000 sword, because that doesn't matter to them either. Because sometimes, especially like with me in my old situation with, you know, my budget with my ex, it's like maybe that, you know, maybe the saving up isn't once that, maybe that 300's there right now, but it ain't going to be there in a month, and it ain't going to be there to just build up and save up on. So might as well get something rather than nothing, you know, and that's kind of, you know, so I would say about $1,000 a year. I don't really buy a whole lot, and usually it's all on the fly. I tend to buy used. I mean, I buy a lot on the Sword Buyer's Guide classifieds because I'll see something and I'll be like, you know, and that's usually my motivation is the lower price, you know, the used price. You know, most of my swords are, you know, used. I don't really have a lot of brand new swords that I bought just because, you know, I'm kind of I've always just had that budget guy instilled in me.
Yeah.
You know, get a
That's
deal.
the thrifty way to do it.
Yeah.
You know, that's the best way. You can save an immense amount of money doing the used market, and it can be a little bit of a game of 99 slaps, because there are people that want you know, if you peruse the used market for a long time, you're like, hey, here's this, I saw this Albion for $500 once, and so now I regret not getting it. So now I'm going to offer $500 every time I see it, but God damn it, I'm not paying a cent more. You know what I mean?
But also there's that catch-22 to where that $500 Abalon wasn't even an Abalon, and it was some scammer that just wanted your $500, and now, you know, checks in the mail, but but the sword ain't on delivery, oh yeah, the sword's on its way, I promise, and
there's a little bit of a risk involved, but
Mhm.
generally speaking, so long as you just follow the general tenets of like, hey,
Mhm.
I pay for the sword first, and I do it with a method that has backsies, right? You don't,
Mhm.
if they're not your friend and you don't trust them, don't pay
Friends and family, yeah.
the friends and family way.
Yeah.
Don't, that they're not either
Mhm.
of those things.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
uh, you have a method for backsies. They put in a tracking number every,
Mhm.
like it usually works out. Some people kind of trust when they shouldn't, that can get you.
Yeah.
But most of the time, swords they don't have moving parts. There's
No.
not a lot that can go wrong. And
Mhm.
if they've been used, that's usually an opportunity. They come with scratches then, but then also if there were any fatal flaws, it would have been a helicopter of death already. So
It
there's
could have been. And you do have that 50-50, or where somebody's just trying to get rid of something, and they're like, yeah, this thing's a piece of crap. I hate it. I want to get rid of it. And they try to sell it and just kind of fluff it. Oh yeah, the sword's fine, and it's
yeah.
discount. Then you get it. I've had one of those. I've even had some sailor stuff. I remember one time, and I got a lot of hard time for this on Sword Barriers Guide, and it really kind of hurt my feelings. But I really got into doing, and I still do. A lot of my swords, I do the custom grip wraps. I love doing grip wraps. It's just a nice, fun thing to do. I did a tutorial on it on the channel, but I did a grip wrap on it. It was one of my first early ones, and I screwed it up because my seam, I did, I missed, so it was a little bit wider up by the guard, and this was on like a windlass sword of Roven. And so I took a little triangle piece of leather, cut it out, and I just put it there. And that way it covered that ugly hole in the seam. You could see the triangle, but the guy I sold it to couldn't handle that. He thought it was garbage. He thought the custom wrap was garbage and I owed him money and all this and that. And then magically he rips the grip off, and then all of a sudden, oh, the handle's cracked. And I was like, well, the handle's cracked on the seam. So I think what you did is when you're trying to peel the leather off, because I always use super glue on my seams so they stay firmer. I was like, you probably cracked it yourself. No, I didn't. You owe me this. So I tried to compensate him, and I got into the mess of overcompensation, got myself in too deep. I ended up just giving the guy money back and saying, you know what, whatever. But yeah, so there is ups and downs to classified sales, but I think still they're good.
Yeah. There are ups and downs, but I think there's generally more to gain, especially as a buyer.
Yeah.
As a buyer, that's where you can really stretch your dollar. You have to be. There's more risk that comes with it, but there's the reward seems to justify it. I've gotten some absolute gems used, and a lot of them have come through eBay.
Yeah.
And so I most of the swords that I buy myself, I would say, are secondhand. If I spend money on it, it's really tough for me to justify.
Yeah.
But I'm like, I could wait and then pay half price for it. Maybe.
Yeah, exactly. And most people do, and most people are doing that because they just want rid of it, or they're just moving it along, and sometimes they're just looking for the next sword themselves.
That's the other thing is the first sword that I had was a painful lesson, and that was, well, not the first sword, but the first like really nice sword that I bought was a Hanwei Praying Mantis. And I tried to do look at reviews on it. I tried to find information, and I couldn't. And then I got the sword, and it's not a bad sword. It just wasn't good for me. It didn't move well for me. I didn't like doing EI with it. I didn't like cutting with it. I didn't like anything about it.
It's a big chopper. Because that's the old L6 one, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
That was the old L6 one.
And I looked and I tried to do all the things. The weight wise didn't show that it was much heavier than the sword I was using, but I didn't realize how much that weight could impact it. The Shobuzakuri wasn't great for doing Iaido with. It came to kind of a point, and it came at the back of my hand in a way that wasn't comfortable. It was kind of cumbersome to move around more so than what I was looking for. There were lots of things that weren't the sword's fault. It was more mine. But then when I sold it, I got like less than half of what I paid for it.
Yeah.
And I sold it pretty quick, and it was not damaged. It was more or less new and had like a few cutting scuffs on it, but the edge was fine. Everything else was good about it. but yeah, I lost so much money on that sword, and I was like, I'm not going to try and do this again.
Well, that's kind of the thing with the market too, and I think that's where, and it shows the evolution of the sword market and the sword world in general. Our little, our little community, that swords have gotten better value, because originally, like I said, yeah, you'd have to. It was almost like you had to give the sword away to get it to sell. It's like, and everybody expected that, and it was almost like an expectation. Like if you're going to sell a sword, like for example on Sword Buyer's Guide Classifieds, you had to sell it for half to just get it to move. Now you see guys more like it's less yard sale and more kind of like antique dealer, or secondhand shop. It's like, well, I know that's a $500 sword, so I didn't touch it. It's in good shape. I never cut with it. So, to move it along, they might take $100 off and say, hey, it's used, so here's $400. You're on your way with shipping, whatever, without shipping, whatever, and all that, and I see that. I see a lot too, like on eBay, and that's why I kind of sometimes have avoided eBay. So I've noticed some sellers will like fluff the price, $120. But then like you look at the shipping and it's like $150. Oh, now I see where I'm getting you're still selling the sword for $300. It's just now you're getting half of it in shipping or something, and that's something that can be, I guess, frustrating to some people. But for the most part, yeah, I enjoy. I think secondhand is the way to go, because I think it gets more people swords in hands. It's almost
for
like
sword collectors. Yes, I think if you're just looking for a sword, it's probably not the right way to go, because there is risk, and you have to know what to look for and what's bad and what shows signs of use and what you'll tolerate, and also kind of be open to what the fates have in store for you, right? At the same time, you can save a lot. It's harder to. It's kind of the same thing, like the people that buy and sell cars all the time. It's like, well, they found some obscure deal somewhere, and it's like, well, not everyone has time to monitor every fucking form everywhere. They need a thing to get up and go, and so it cost them $2,000 more to buy it from the dealership or whatever. But then it was, they had 5 minutes to think about it and moved on with their life.
Yeah.
So that, if you're not obsessed about it, I don't know that the secondhand market is. I'm not obsessed. If you're not like into the hobby, it's probably not the right way to go. But if you are, there's absolutely savings to be had there, and that's where I got a lot of my stuff is secondhand, for sure.
Yeah, me too, definitely. I think that's where being in the community and having like a community, like even with us as sword tubers guys, that's why I've said, I've said it to some of the other guys too, like Buy the Sword and stuff, and Vic Unsheathed and all those guys. It's like we should be doing more of this, this chatting, and because it benefits, it enriches everyone that's interested in swords, but it also lets us kind of form that community that kind of is strong and kind of builds swords in general, and it builds the manufacturers and vendors too, because now they do have reps. Even if we aren't like a stake in the ground, name tag rep, at least they can look at us as like, hey, they're for everybody, and it's not like the nitpicky stuff, and it just, we can all just kind of share minds, it's like having joint reviews. That'd be kind of cool to start doing, maybe, is like when we both have the same sword, or let's say like you guys, like all you guys that got the Azure swords, maybe you guys sit down and even though I know we're all hundreds of miles away from each other, but at least get on here and hold the sword and say, hey, this is what I thought about it. What did you think about it, Matt? Well, I thought this. Oh, hey, I didn't think about that. That's pretty cool. And it adds that enrichment to the review that, somebody might not, get individually from each of us, or they'd have to like kind of pick each of our reviews from. But I think that's where just
communication is a tricky one.
Yeah.
You mentioned something earlier about compensation, and like doing this as a job is just not a realistic thing, right?
Yeah.
In my mind, not to say that if anyone else follows your train of thought to success, right? If you can make a living doing it, props to you. I don't foresee that happening, and so
no.
Like that means that this is a hobby for me, right?
Yeah.
I get to do it when I have the time to do it,
Mhm.
and I've dedicated a fair amount of my free time to this sword
Yeah.
hobby, but
Mhm.
it doesn't unfortunately align with everyone's schedule, and so
No,
when
it doesn't.
when you get the same sword, uh, you also know that like, hey, YouTube is she is a fickle mistress, so
Mhm.
uh, having something to put out this week is kind of important if you want to see growth and like have
Mhm.
a channel that isn't completely dead.
Mhm.
Likewise, somebody else gets the sword, and when they're reviewing it and when their schedule lines up, it's tough to do. I have done a number of like collaborative, what do you think, and then we get in a live stream together,
Mhm.
and it seems to have been helpful. I always like doing it when those things happen. It's just
Mhm.
can be tricky to align, and also we don't publish. Hey, here's the shit that I have in my stock that I still have to make reviews on.
Yeah.
We maybe that should be the thing. Like what swords are you reviewing so we could align, because
Well, and that's also what happens when a sword kind of gets, and that's the other thing that kind of sucks with the market is what happens when you have a sword that is all of a sudden discontinued, and then it's kind of pointless to review. Especially like with Hanwei going out of business. I mean, there was a lot of Hanwei swords. Like I behind me here, one of them. You can't see it because it's right behind me, but I have the Hanwei mortuary hilt sword, and which one is God, let's lost my the oh man, sound like an amateur. I forgot his name, but anyway, I got that sword, and
the William Marshall, is that what you mean?
no, it's the basket hilt. Maybe if I hold it, I'll remember.
Cromwell.
Yeah, Cromwell. Yeah. I got the Cromwell sword, but again, what's the point of reviewing it? It's
Fucking amateur.
discontinued and not on sale. It's like, hey, yeah, check out this sword. You want to see this sword you can't buy? Yeah, let me show.
There is some fun to that. I've done it with Last Legend just because they come up secondhand often enough,
Mhm.
and it's helpful. Like every now and again, I'll get somebody that says like, "Hey, what do you know about this Last Legend thing? I see one on
Yeah.
eBay or in this forum or on Craigslist or something," and I'm like,
Mhm.
"Oh, maybe it's time to revisit revisit that
Well, that's what
conversation."
and I have something like that on my channel that I call re-reviews, and that's what kind of it is. It's like taking an old sword.
Joe is
Um,
telling us we're two guys that don't shut up. That's
we
what
don't.
he's
I
saying.
know we're
The
like,
gift of gab.
it's so good we're not neighbors. We'd be out over the fence, and wives would be like, get inside. Why aren't you inside yet?
I actually probably should be wrapping things up in the not too
Yeah.
distant future with actually Joe's snide commentary about two sword aficionados that don't want to shut up. Is there anything topic wise that you would like to cover before we wind things down?
No, I think did we cover enough what you wanted to talk about, which was kind of my arguments on the reviewers. I could try to. I know I ramble, but I guess like I said, you said it was okay to ramble, so I did. But
yes,
I
rambles are
guess,
welcome.
and long story short, in that sense, I guess it doesn't bother me. I mean, I think you get free swords, more power to you. I'm not like, oh, you guys in your free swords, stick them or something. I'm not mad at anybody. I'm not mad at anybody. I just think that if you're going to get free swords, because I've gotten free swords, I've gotten a handful from Paul. Like I said, I'd be a hypocrite if I said, oh no, don't take free swords. I just think that again, if you're going to get the free swords, be honest with them, and then also you vendors, or manufacturers, whoever, if you're going to send swords, take that feedback and be honest with it. Don't just like kind of blow it off and be legit with it. Take the advice. I mean, that's what you're got. I've always took and had the opinion that when we get something, they want our feedback. So if you're going to ask for our feedback, take it, or what's the point? I mean, if it is just free advertising, because hey, look at this sword and I cut with it, and you're going to link it to all your social media sites and sell a sword, great. But I still think that I more power to you. I mean, send all the swords out you want. It doesn't bother me. I think that the more swords you get out, it can kind of, if they're not being constructively reviewed, then it does kind of become a problem, because it just becomes like an oversaturated thing. And it's just, it's like, oh, well, these swords are just cool because they're these swords, rather than, and I got it, rather than, hey, this sword could potentially be problematic, if it's weak or something, it's, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of factors into it, but I think really just overall that, if you're going to review swords, just, review them to the full extent, and just, yeah, like you said, give that honest opinion. And yeah, no hard feelings, like I said, I know I've kind of, in a few comments, I've been kind of snidey with a lot of like the plagiaristic stuff. And I think hopefully, I know it's been a long ramble, but I broke that down to simply being like, if you want to be legit, if this market wants to be legit about making medieval swords and making proper medieval swords that people can appreciate and do have that level of historical accuracy that does make like the Albions and the ANAs sought after and respected, then yeah, do it right, and know what you're selling, and don't, don't just smash a sword together and sell it. I mean, you can, because it's going to sell either way, because there's the fantasy side too. Most people, they just want, what's that?
It seems to be working.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Because, and that's what I mean. I mean, everybody wants, not everybody cares if the sword belonged to Sir William Marshall. But you know what? If the sword could be used by, Sir Roger from the mystic land of Avalon in their D&D campaign, they're going to buy it either way. It's what they like, and that's where, like I said, if you want to, and that's where I think like a lot of these vendors that are coming out, like the Sword Ear and stuff, if they focus more on fantasy and not even the unlicensed fantasy, I mean, I guess that's a bias too we didn't catch on, is, what makes it okay to make a like a Conan or a Lord of the Rings knockoff compared to a historical accurate one? Or what's the difference between copying the Kingmaker and copying the Lord of the Rings sword? Well, the Lord of the Rings sword doesn't have a functional counterpart on the market, so it kind of justifies it a little bit, I guess, in my opinion. If you want a Strider sword and you want to cut with it, and United Cutlery or Weta or who Warner Brothers, whoever owns the Lord of the Rings rights, doesn't want to make that for the person, then you can get it elsewhere. I guess, yeah, get it elsewhere, because they're not offering it legitimately. But either way, it's just a sword, so it doesn't really matter. People are going to buy what they like. They're going to buy what's cool. They're going to buy what appeals to them, and there's more power to that. I have more respect and power to that than, being, shaking fingers and having attitude. And I think one of the problems that maybe some people had a perception of me is that I kind of did shake my finger a little bit. And that was more of a personal thing. And I apologize for that, because that was kind of me airing my personal beef and frustration, rather than really just looking at it from a buyer's perspective, which is what we should be doing as reviewers. Why do you want to buy this sword? That's what matters.
I feel like if I want to be helpful in a conversation, my objective is to give people information so that they can make an informed decision. And that's what I feel like I didn't have with that first sword I talked to you about, right?
Yeah.
I didn't have enough information to make a good decision. I made a bad one. It cost me a bunch of money, made me real sad. Kind of almost killed my interest in swords, and that would suck, because I've liked swords since I was 5. It's one of the earliest things that I remember liking, and like having that interest carry over my entire life. Would have been a shame to lose that over a bad transaction.
Me too.
Which wasn't even the sword's fault, right? So the thing I can do is provide information, and I don't have to agree with it or not. I just have to provide it. And some people, they're in this chat. Some people have very strong feelings about the copyright, and say like, hey, you can't copyright a sword. The idea is preposterous that you would even think that you could copyright a sword. It's a historical object. All of these pieces existed historically. In what combination you combine them it doesn't matter. Right.
It doesn't. And
other folks will say like it absolutely does. You can copy it, write it for the same reason you can copyright a song or a book. And I bet if I went and copied, if they had a YouTube channel and just re-uploaded their videos, and I was like, you can't copyright a fucking video. There's videos everywhere. Like,
yeah, but they can.
They would probably get real mad, right?
I got a good, perfect short example of that. I just posted my new little shorts that we're cutting, in my cutting video with the Hanwei Iga Ninja Toe. I have been plotting this for years, since I did the review of the Hanwei Iga Ninja Toe. And I was going to do the cutting video, and I was going to have a little background music. And the background music was going to be to Sho Kazuki's Revenge of the Ninja and the title theme to that song, because that song is just ninja. I mean, when you just see ninja in big bold letters when you hear that background song. I don't know if you ever heard that, but look up Revenge of the Ninja soundtrack and you'll hear it. Anyway, I did the video and I got it. There was a 50-50 chance that the production studio was going to block the video because copyrighted material. I didn't ask permission to use the song. But they also thought that, well, it's 40 years old, so maybe, it's in the archives, so whatever. No, I get a copyright strike. Not because of Canon Films or Sho Kazuki or Ninjas United, from some rapper kid that took a song from a moderately well-known rapper, made his own mix of that rapper's song with the Ninja song in it. He did a little DJ thing where he spliced the songs. I got a copyright strike because he did that little splice thing in 2010. Explain that.
Well, YouTube's copyright system is flawed. That I can't give you a great explanation for. The overarching theory, though, of hey, I made a song, I made an artwork, and maybe I make a painting. You really like that painting, you want a copy, and I say, eat a fucking dick. I made one of them. And you say, well, I took a picture of it, so I made a print of it, and now I have it. Mm-hmm. That's theft. I made it. It's mine. I didn't give permission for distribution. Mm-hmm. And then you start taking it and selling it because it's a cool painting. That's theft. There's not really another way to describe it. So in the case of the Kingmaker, and Azure Forge is here, right? And I think they've done about as good as a person can do in this situation.
I think they did too. That's what I respected.
Yeah. But there's absolutely a difference between the other swords that I've seen and a really solid design. They have the capability of making really awesome swords, but they need a template or something to work on.
And that's where when I emailed them, I wanted to help them because I said, you know what? There is books. You don't see them over here, but I got a line of medieval books,
I believe you can read.
Sword. Yeah. All of them.
I don't think that just because you're from Idaho, you can't read. I'm not that kind of guy.
Okay, good. Because we're very educated in Idaho. It's we just don't tell anybody because we don't want anybody else moving here. But yeah. Anyway, it's with that. So and there's so many cool swords that aren't even replicated. It's like me, like you probably noticed. Find me 20 Type 18s on the production market. Easy. Find me 20 Type 14s. Bop, 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 bop. Okay, now find me 20 Type 11s. Find me 20 Type 17s. Find me 20 Type 19s. There's so many different swords that could be made, but they keep making these same ones. And I get why they do it because they want to get it. It's just like with Azure Forge. I don't want to spike anything, but I mean, technically, if someone wanted to be shitty and call the plagiarism, the Kawwood was made by Hanwei. They're just copying Hanwei. The Schlosserbach was made by Windlass. It's still being sold by a version sold by Windlass. They're just copying Windlass. I mean, you could have those shitty arguments. Are they dumb? Well, sort of. Because
the Schlosserbach is maybe another interesting one, right? Because Azure Forge is making one of those too, and I got it, and I like it, honestly. I mean, short answer. Now I have the Schlosserbach from Arms and Armor, and I've also had because Arms and Armor is local to me. I've gotten to go and handle the original, thanks to the generosity and time of the folks over there at the Oakshott Institute. So they broke it out, and I got to look at a new example of a Schloss and my old example of a Schloss and the actual Schlosserbach. And so they are reproducing a historic original sword to the best of their ability. And Windlass did the same thing. I don't. It's a fair question because it's a historical sword. I believe any copyright law expires after a time, right? Like you
Well,
can't
yeah.
own
And
the
we're talking
copyright in perpetuity.
hundreds of years. Yeah.
So if Mickey Mouse is up for grabs, then I believe the Schloss is probably safe.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you're making a historic recreation and you make a derivative version of that, which I would say, in my personal opinion, the example of they don't call it a Schloss, I think, but it's clearly inspired by it. It has similar, but it's different enough. The pommel is a different shape. It's spiraled, but in a different way.
Yeah.
The guard has got the same spiral pattern, but it's wider and also different, and it makes some effort to be its own thing.
Yeah.
And so in that case, like but even if they had made an exact copy, because that's a copy of a sword,
a historical original. And I'm of the same way. I'm the same way. I don't think you can plagiarize historical originals. I think that, and this is something that Peter hit on in your guys' interview, you're doing yourself a disservice. And this goes back to your kind of opinion on silhouette windlasses from like the 2000s. If you're gonna recreate a sword, do it. Do it right. Check, get the stats. Whatever. If you're just going to make something that looks like it, then you're not doing the buyer or the sword itself the homage, the service it deserves. Because, in a sense, if you're trying to replicate kind of like these Royal Armory swords, that's why I like them so much. I got so many of them because I can hold it in my hand and it's kind of a guarantee that, with their 1-to-1 guarantee, this is like going back in time, basically, obviously not, but it would be like if we had a time machine like that Paul Walker show, that he had the time traveling one where they went to the 100 Years' War. I could take that sword and leave it there and leave, kind of the same thing with like a lot of people with like the Avalon museum lines. It's like you could take that sword and set it there and leave, and then the original owner wouldn't know the difference. Obviously, that's dumb, and they would, but that's that 1-to-1 recreation that I think people are interested in. That's what always got me interested in swords, as far as like getting into the Oakshott typology and stuff, is learning the history. Where was this sword? What was this sword about? Who owned this sword? Who and that's one thing that, the stories is what attracts me to swords. I love the stories. A sword can cut all day, but I want to know the story of this sword. I want to know whose hip it was on, where it was used, where it was found, why it was found there, it just all that stuff. That's what always interests me. And like we said, with the Oakshott typology stuff, there's so many swords that get ignored that have so much history and are really cool looking swords too, that it's like, why hasn't nobody made a copy of that yet? Why not even try? As your forge, I got 12 swords. I could make you a line right now that I have schematics on that I think would make cool swords. I did a little article on, not an article, but a little post on Sword Buyer's Guide the other day, because we were talking about Royal Armories, like if there's going to be a Series 3. And I said, well, I was going to pick 6 swords for a Series 3, boom, 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 boom. And it's just good. And it just, that's what I love to do with it. I love finding those unique swords and being like, hey, that's, this would make an awesome sword. Let's make it. We don't need 500 Brescia Spadonas. Let's find something else similar that's just as cool, that can be uniquely your own. What's that?
Swiss sabers.
The sabers. See, and that's the thing. You might hate me. I don't want to make us not friends after talking for 3 hours, but I'm not a big saber guy. I love my cruciform hilts. I'm a medieval guy, tried and true.
That's fine. I'm just saying the Swiss saber is like, it's a complex, hilted, weird, messer, European awesomeness. And
yeah, it is. I'm not saying it's not awesome. It's just, if somebody handed me a saber, I'd be like, give me a longsword. It's just how I'm wired. But at the same time, I do appreciate, like I said, I love the mortuary hilts, the basket hilts. My Scottish blood flows when I'm holding a basket hilt. I just, I do like those complex, intricate hilts. But yeah, that's what I mean. And that's actually, if you look at that, Sword Buyer's Guide, that forum page, and you'll see I have 3 or 4 basket hilts in my list. 3 of them are intricate hilts. because I do love them, and I think they need more represented on the market. That's one thing I do miss, even though they were clunkily built. If you remember, like in the late 2000s, especially windlass, they were making some really cool like rapier and basket hilts and stuff like that. And you don't see those on the market anymore because, like I said, everything.
No, they're hard to make. Honestly, like I'm not. What's the best way to like? I don't like swords that don't feel like swords, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I can accept that there were some munitions-y grade kind of things, and that not all swords have to feel dynamically amazing. Mm-hmm. And if the sword is made to, you know, the original example had no distal taper, and it's meant to be as much a club as it is a sword, cool. Like I can respect that. I might not enjoy it as much for backyard fun, but I can respect that. Like you hit the mark you were setting. Mm-hmm. And it'd be great if more of those were produced so people had examples. The windlass ones were just, and some of the early rapiers from them as well, and the early backsword and broadswords, the Scottish variety, were just not at all the way those swords felt.
No, they were heavy and they were wrist breakers, or the rapiers were flimsy noodles and they just, you know, flipping around, and they were all screw-on hilts that were poorly constructed. I know I had a few of them myself, or played with a few of them myself. I remember I went to a Ren fair and somebody had an old windlass rapier. I was like, oh, I remember this guy, and I held him and I'm like, oh my God, I'm so glad I never bought this like I wanted to, because I would have hated it. And you know, and I agree. And that's what I love about the modern sword industry, with all these, with Swordier, with Azure, because they are so, the bar's raised. And
I'd agree.
It's great. I love it. I love the fact that, for example, like I said, with this seneschal, you know, looking at this seneschal, this is a windlass. If you told somebody this was a windlass and they didn't know it, they probably think you were full of it, you know. You know, especially when you put it in comparison on my review, I was holding my old 14 next to it. And does the 14 cut? Is it a decent sword? Is it? Yeah, but this is so much better. Now they can do so much better for the same price. Prove it. Keep doing it. And I think that's something that, you know, that I see with these, that I'm excited with the Azures and the Swordiers and stuff like that, is that they are making things to a finer detail. When I got those prototypes I got, you know, one of them, like here, like this one right here, was one that I reviewed, and I think you have one of these too, don't you? The pattern welded 14.
Yeah,
did you get one too for review? And I was like, holy crap! How did they get this for under $300? They're selling these for under $300, and this reminds me of like, and of course I did my own grip wrap, so it's a little prettier than the original. But but I mean, you know, grip wrap aside, even the fit and finish is very like Valiant. What was it? Craftsman line. Remember their Chinese line they had in like the late 2000s?
I think the Craftsman line is like the line they sell now. But they did have like
the signature line. Signature line. Yeah, you know, their signature line. It just, it was like you know, that's what that reminds me of. And that was like a $400, $500 sword back in the day, those Valiants.
Well, the Valiants back in the day still had the scabbards that they made here. So the scabbard stuff is not really all that different. And that one is still lacking. And the earlier Valiant stuff also, they had a little bit better take on some of the furniture, but they didn't make a pattern welded blade. Like the blade, I would say, is very similar. The heat treatment, unfortunately, as well, because that one, I like it would bend at the tang a little bit. Swordier is a great example, though, and I think you're hitting on something really important. I mean, 15 years ago, we had
junk.
Like a sword that felt like a sword was kind of a diamond in the rough. You know what I mean? And you had to wade through a lot of examples that looked the part but didn't feel the part, or felt the part but looked awful. And those were very, very few and far between. And now it seems like you really only have, well, you still have bad options, but there's a lot more really good options that walk the line between a sword that is durable and a reasonable, you know, a simulation of what could be historical and feels like an actual sword and is not overbuilt. Or if it is, it's, you know, there's a lot more thought and intent that goes behind it. And there's a number of people hitting on those things. And so you, as a buyer, you're in a great place. You have many more options than you did before. and other folks, like you mentioned,
Yeah.
windlass.
Absolutely.
I never would have thought before the Royal Armouries line that I would like it's not to say I wouldn't like something that windlass made. It's just that the examples would be almost in spite of windlass rather than because of them.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah,
and now
exactly.
I really think that they're very capable, and I'm kind of eager to see what they make, especially in the Royal Armouries line. And I know they've come out with some own models themselves that seem to be leveraging that, like, oh, we can make it dynamically good, and people will still buy it. And
well,
so
yeah, and that's one of the things that I learned, like with my time, buying windlass and even like talking with them, like as a customer, getting on the phone and just asking questions. They were very, here's a picture of this sword. Now let's make it. So they made it very two-dimensional. And now, like collaborating with Matt Easton, who's over in England, and he's in the Royal Armouries, and he's going in and out, and he's getting these swords, and getting the dimensions. He's taking those dimensions back to them, and they're making swords, proper looking and proper handling swords. And I think that's what it is that when the proper research is done, and it's kind of like the Chinese market, it's kind of like with when you used to get like the old Chinese medieval swords that were very Chinese, they looked kind of like Jian, and they didn't really look like a medieval sword. They were just, very, very, just diamond cross section, very parallel, not a lot of profile taper and stuff. They just kind of, But anyway, are you getting tired, Matt? Have I wore you out?
No, you're touching on something that I as well would agree with. Like the early examples kind of felt like Jian, and now they're still in the mix a little bit, but
they
there's
are,
a better command over what a European sword should be, and there's absolutely more options. And I do think you're right though. Like I see a lot of some sort of interpretation of an 18B. Or maybe mostly like in that vein with varying degrees of like cross section. And then you see like type 14s represented, but you don't see a lot of mix. And there's starting to be some type 15s in there as well. There's a few of those kind of mixed in. So there's more, but it certainly isn't the same variety.
And kind of like with the sword ear thing, it's like, okay, when they came out with their 18C, I know you guys and a few other guys reviewed it. It's not an 18C, it's a 15A, because it's got the acute taper and it's got the acute tip. There's nothing wrong with that sword. It's a great 15A, but you're trying to sell it as an 18C to appeal to that 18C market. And it's like, well, if you knew what the sword was, guys, you wouldn't be foolhardy. It wouldn't be foolhardy.
There's a fine barn, but there's no pool.
Yes, exactly.
There we go.
Yep.
Well, we should wind things down. I was going to get the stink eye about 20 minutes ago. I think I'm well past. I think I have stink eyes at this point from my better half. So,
I kicked everybody out. I'm all by myself. I went. I was like, go out to dinner. I'm going to go talk swords for a few hours.
I'm going to talk on the internet with some other guy that likes talking about swords. It's going to be a long time. But before I go, do you ever say like, oh, I'm going to talk with this guy about swords for a few minutes. I'll be there in like an hour. And then 5 hours goes by and you're like, yeah, I'm real sorry. And then
my worst one is I have a bad habit of leaving the shower running, because I love answering comments on my YouTube channel. So when I get up in the morning, I'll get ready. I'll get the shower going. And then I'll move around. I'll get my clothes out, and by then I'm usually putting on my phone, because I'll listen to something on my YouTube. I'll have it on YouTube, listening to something while I'm in the shower. Brianna's like, yes, he does. Yeah, I just got called out, and so anyway, so I'll sit there. And next one, I'm sitting there for like 20 minutes. Thank God I got a powerful freaking a water heater, because I'd be freezing my ass off every morning, because I sit there and I'm like, oh no, I better answer real quick. Oh, don't want to lose that train of thought. I'll answer real quick, and then I'll jump in the shower and then get out. Next thing you know, I'm texting it. That's usually what it is. It's usually that, or like getting on SBG and like answering something, or being part of a thread. But normally, no, I don't really have a lot of I guess, as you phrase them, sword friends here in around here because they're just, you know, they're kind of
I don't
obscure.
necessarily mean that. There's just anytime as you might be able to tell I'm chatty, but if I'll go on vacation or something, and there'll be a museum to look at, or a person who is around that makes a thing, or a fellow collector that invites me to look at stuff, and I'll tell my lovely better half, like, oh, you know, I'm gonna go check out this thing. I probably need 2-3 hours, and then like 6 days goes by, and I'm like, yeah, I'm sorry, you know. But it's more or less like the same habit a crack addict would have, you know, like, I'm sorry, I disappeared for so long and spent all my money, but you know, like that.
I am okay, even when it's not even sword evolved, absolutely. And she'll probably say yes, he does next too, since he's watching. You know, that's loyalty. That's a loyal woman right there that you know, sat with us for 3 hours because she's, you know,
wow,
she's supportive.
Hey, you were here the whole time.
I got her. She likes swords and she hangs out. I mean, that's a keeper, I think. But you know,
he has. It's just we're at almost 3 hours.
Yeah, I know,
don't think there's been a dull moment. There's not a lot of opportunity to grab. I don't think either of us have come up for air.
What's the Guinness World Record? We're going to beat it, Matt.
I don't think we're anywhere near.
We don't want to either.
No,
we don't want to. Somebody's
going to have to pee.
Yes, exactly. But like to reiterate, but yeah, I'm the same way. I will sit there and I will chat. And if they do have something that they ask me a question about a topic, like it's the lo and behold, like, never ask David about swords. You know, I have a nickname, a nerdy nickname. I used to have a group when a town north of us in Idaho, McCall. I don't know if you ever heard of it, but I lived in McCall for a lot of years, and I worked at a hotel. I worked in hotels up there. It was hospitality, and I had a night auditor, a graveyard guy that was really into D&D. His name is Dan. So if Dan's watching, and there's your shout out, Dan. But Dan was cool because Dan was like into D&D, and he had all the 3rd edition books, and that's how I broke the ice, because I used to play D&D a little bit in high school, and I was like, hey, you like D&D? And then it was like, boom, you know, next thing we're talking about D&D. But long story short, you know, with a lot of that, they used to call me, there was this comic book, web comic called like 8-bit something or other, 8-bit theater or something, I think. And it was like Final Fantasy 8-bit characters, but it was like this little comic book this guy did. I don't know if you ever heard of it or seen it, but he loved it. He was always on like our company computer at the front desk watching it and reading it. But the fighter, they'd always tease the fighter because everything about the fighter, the running joke was swords. You know, everything, it was kind of like, Dr. Evil with freaking laser beams, you know, but it's always like, yeah, and if you got that and you put a sword on it, it would be that much better. So I got the joke because I was the sword guy that I was, because they always say, hey, have you noticed fighter kind of like swords? It was a running joke on that comic. And that was kind of my nickname, was fighter kind of like swords. And they would call me that because everything that we would do in D&D, and I was one of those guys, like Shad did a few videos, where it's like, that's not how a longsword works. That's an arming sword. And I do that in D&D, and I'd argue it. And then it'd be like, shut up. Nobody cares. You know, but
I tried a D&D group once. I'm not above it. But I don't think it was fun. I didn't take it seriously enough.
Yeah.
And so I was not invited to.
You were playing it like Yahtzee. You were just scratching numbers and adding, and okay, I think I killed him because I.
No, the game master was the GM.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So he was okay, and they were up for a jovial time, but I made too much of a joke out of it, and I didn't.
They kicked.
I like the strategy part. So like Baldur's Gate 3, XCOM 2, like these games where you're moving chess pieces around.
Yeah,
I like that aspect of it, but like the storytelling side of it didn't resonate with me, and I started off to just make something too funny. I believe. I can't remember all the details, but I played a character that had a cock for an arm, and whenever he would fight, and like you would look at nudie pictures, and then like blood flow and thought would stop. So like that, but like he was like, I'll allow it, and I was like, all right, and I leaned into that, and it was not, and it became just too much of a joke. So
too much of a yeah. And I've noticed that some guys just do take it too serious, and then it just kind of quits being fun. And that's with anything. I mean, you got to have fun with it. If you're not having fun with it, what are you doing? And like we had a guy in our group when I was playing with those McCall kids that he would reference Bryan Adams songs. Like, for example, let's say he was a thief and he did a sneak attack. The next, he's humming "Cuts Like a Knife." He was always doing that, but it was always Bryan Adams songs, which was always weird. I don't know why, but it was always Bryan Adams songs, but it annoyed the DM that would play with us, and he would be like, "Stop!" And it was
Bryan Adams songs.
Yes.
Let's see. XCOM 2 was like 30 years ago. Yes, I know. They haven't made another good one in a minute.
Mm-hmm.
It's tough to find turn-based tactical strategy games.
Well, hey, if people are talking games, the only good Final Fantasy is free on Game Pass. I don't know if anybody's got an Xbox, but Final Fantasy 4. I'm probably going to get a lot of hate and lose half my subscribers, but that's my favorite Final Fantasy game, 4, and it's free. And it's old.
I can't do those anymore. I can't. And it's funny because I remember having so much fun through Final Fantasy 10. Really, I think I enjoyed the series. 10, I was already kind of starting to lose it. Then 10-2 came out, and at the time, I was one of those guys that was like, "Hey, whatever Square makes, I will buy, and I will try to enjoy it." And then 10-2 came out, and I was like, "Fuck you guys forever! I'm never buying anything from you ever again."
Yeah, because that's when it went real time, wasn't it? It was like that.
No, when it went to a Japanese like sing along karaoke for 13 girls. I was like, "Well, what the shit is this?" And, and then I literally never bought another Final. It was so bad. I literally never played Final Fantasy.
I never could get into those. I couldn't even get into like the new 15 because it's just too like sci-fi modern. Even Final Fantasy 7. I know like a lot of people love Final Fantasy 7, but I want my Final Fantasy with wizards, warriors, and knights and dragons and all that. I don't like the cars and in this futuristic techie sci-fi. It doesn't seem right to me. Because I remember like 10. I was actually talking about 10 because a guy at my work is a really big Nick. He's a really big Final Fantasy guy, and in Final Fantasy 10. And I was like, yeah, I think I played that once because I got a demo. But I got a demo was actually Dragon Quest 8 when it came out. I don't know if you ever played Dragon Quest 8, but it came out on PlayStation 2, and it came with a free demo because they're both made by Square Enix. And I was like, yeah, I think I played it once. I didn't like it. I didn't like the demo. I never played it again. But yeah, I'm like, I like those old 16-bit RPGs. If I'm going to play one, it's just I'm showing my age. But yeah, I'm just
you've got good taste. I enjoyed those as well. The most fun I remember having were these Final Fantasy on the Super Nintendo. I remember playing that. I don't like they called them 2 and 3, but that wasn't the real chronological order. And then
it was like 4 and 6, I think.
Yeah, something like that. I'm not sure exactly which one. And then I remember really enjoying Final Fantasy 7. And now if I try to go back and play it, like the polygonal stuff just doesn't do it for me. That era of graphics just I believe I physically hate. Like it makes me angry to try and watch it now.
Yeah,
16-bit doesn't bother me. The little sprites are great, but like watching the early PlayStation 1 graphics, I just can't do it.
PlayStation 1's just so muddy; it's hard on your eyes,
and the story is incoherent and nonsensical. Like you try to play it, and I was like, why did this make sense to me when I was 11? Like
tank controls like Resident Evil. I don't know if you like Resident Evil games on PlayStation or Nintendo 64, but
I remember the original one because I'm old, and I remember it was scary. And I remember like I remember playing like a video game isn't gonna fucking scare me, and I played it. I'm like, oh, this is fucking scary.
Yeah, I remember. It did too. I had jump scares from Resident Evil 2, when the liquor's crawling off the ceiling. But it was like the tank controls on that, where you'd like, the controlling the guy. And then I went to just for fun, nostalgia fun, tried to play it again, and I'm like, how did I beat this game? I can't even walk anymore because I'm so used to modern controls. But yeah, I would say if I'm a fan of any video game, like my number one, it would be Zelda. I'm a Zelda guy. Have been since I was a little kid. And thanks to swords.
I
Link uses a sword.
I went back and I beat the first one on the Super Nintendo, and I remember the Link to the Past on the Super Nintendo. I'm sorry, I beat the one on the original Nintendo, and then on a Game Boy after it came out later. So I never did as a kid, but I played the one on the Super Nintendo quite a bit. That was great. The modern ones though, I just haven't. I don't know. The thing is, I don't have the twitchy skills anymore.
Yeah.
And so playing a game that requires accuracy with a controller is tough. Ask anyone who plays Apex Legends with me. I don't have the motor control to do it anymore.
Yeah.
So if there's a game that is like, hey, maybe think about what you want to do, go have a beer, come back tomorrow. That's the kind of game, which is why XCOM can work. Because I'm like, I failed at this 45 times. I can try again. Like that's more my speed. And the twitchy ones where you require motor skills, I don't have them anymore.
No,
and on that depressing note, I should probably get my kiddos to bed because
it's been 3 hours. Yes, but
all right. Well,
all right, Matt.
Thank you, chat, for everyone who has been here and keeping the conversation lively. I think I did a marginally better job of keeping track of it. Not great. And David, thank you for joining me. Any final words?
Absolutely. No, I just, hey, everybody that is watching, thanks for watching. Thanks for being part of our community and talking swords and enjoying it. Definitely, enjoy both channels. Enjoy my content. I hope you enjoy Matt's content, and that's why you're here watching us and supporting us. Like I said, as Matt said earlier, we don't do this for money. I know I made that hypothetical of hey, maybe reviewers should get paid. I mean, yeah, it'd be nice to get paid, but no, we do this because we have fun with swords, because we have a whole lot of swords and we like talking about them. And the easiest way to do that is to a camera on YouTube, because it's a lot of fun. And I just want to thank you guys for watching. I want to thank Matt for inviting me to this. I've always kind of felt like the black sheep as far as sword tubers, just because I've seen a lot of them collaborate, and this is my first time, so hopefully it's not the last time either. So but yeah, thank you, Matt, and thank you, everybody. I had a lot of fun, and hopefully I didn't bore anyone and talk too much.
I'm so happy I could be your first. I didn't know you were a sword collaborator virgin, but no, there you go.
Yeah. Thanks, Matt. I'll always remember you.
Cheers, everyone.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.